Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers, the quintessential Counter-Strike podcast. I'm Richard Lewis. That's Duncan Thorin Shields. We got Sam lurking in the background of my house, pressing the buttons and producing the show. Definitely didn't wake up and immediately for breakfast have a bottle of cider and like 2 fucking super strong edibles out of the fridge. Didn't do that.
Morning.
Sam would never do.
Just gotta take the edge off, mate. Bad night of sleep now.
I thought I had fucking problems. Like this last week living with you, I've never seen anything like it.
He's taken the term edible too literally, hasn't he? Like, you are supposed to eat them, but they're not actually food, you know. Like,
I'm just living off them.
Yeah, it's unreal. Like, since he got out here, like I said, it's been about a week. Obviously, like, you can just go get weed and it's legal and stuff here in Nevada, which is one of the perks of living here for sure. But like, he spent about $900.
Oh, yeah.
so,
Close to $1,000 by now, yeah.
Yeah.
what sort of tolerance have you got?
Oh, really? Just mate, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to beat the system, but it's not working.
He's trying to get me, right? Like, he's trying to get me to get a medical card so he can get the fucking shit they give to, like, terminally ill people.
Oh, right, like the fucking...
Yeah, it's like 1,000 milligrams, yeah.
Yeah. That's where he's at in terms of tolerance. Like, him and fucking Joey Diaz are just on another fucking planet by themselves. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But anyway, yeah, you just press those buttons.
Are you just going to live there now, Sam?
No, I'm just here for a couple of months, building like a little studio
Just a
and
couple
stuff.
of months. Just here for a couple of months, see if I can wreck myself with edibles.
See how deep I can go.
I reckon we just go out to the desert and dig up some fucking fresh peyote at this point. I think that's about where we need to be. But yeah, just ridiculous stuff. What about you, Duncan? What have you been up to?
Just doing esports content and that.
Yeah.
Nothing interesting. Reading books. Listening to... Actually, to be fair, I'm exactly where I want to be. Love it. Love a bit of that.
Good for you, man. So look, I'm going to try and get through all the stuff we've got to do so we're fully caught up. This will probably be more of a minor kind of rundown, you know, talking about all the minors that we've had and all the storylines that are coming out of there. Yeah. But I just want to start the show strong and talk about one storyline in particular that I think you will definitely have some insight into, that I think people will enjoy our insight into.
Sounds like drama.
Well, no, it's not drama. It's just absolute comically dog shit teams. Yeah. So obviously I'm referring to NTC, now Take Como, or however you want to talk about it. Yeah. There it is. They were at the American Minor, and obviously for people that don't know and maybe haven't followed it all, you know, we get new people coming into the show all the time. Keep in mind, this was meant to be the team that was going to break away from Immortals, you know, kind of reset the high bar, potentially even become the best team in Brazil, because SK Gaming, as they were back then before they were MIBR, started having this drop in form, and you know, there was this NTC group, which is meant to be like the bad boys of Counter-Strike. They do it their way. They don't follow the rules, but they're all amazing players, so you got to respect it. And we all know as well that they were supposed to be joining SK Gaming sort of in kind of a two-way, you know, shuffle. Well, look, there was a story that broke from ESPN Brazil during the American Minor, which was like, basically, if they couldn't beat Swole Patrol, which is like Freakazoid's fun team, they couldn't beat Swole Patrol in a best of 3. The org was immediately cutting them. And obviously, they've lost Henny now. They've lost Lucas. We know they're
not exactly an unreasonable fucking demand.
No. I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, if you cannot beat fucking Swole Patrol in a best of 3, probably you're not the top tier team that you think you are. So anyway, now we've had a story kind of come out post Americans Minor, which we'll give a more detailed rundown in just a moment, where basically they're now saying we're going to remove FNX and BIT. That's the story that's come out of it. And I just want to say, like, if you go all the way back to the start of the Immortals disaster and onwards to where we are right now, I'll say it one more time. Henny, Lucas, and KNG absolutely destroyed the Brazilian scene. I mean, they destroyed it. You had 2 established top 10 teams, and now it's just an absolute fucking clusterfuck, the likes of which I've never seen. They're now, I mean, bits.
Well, the funny thing is, Richard, I think it even goes more literal than you're thinking, because obviously they destroyed their own team.
Yeah.
But in a way, they did destroy SK in as much as SK, I actually think, would have tried to get some of these guys. Like we said this on a past episode, I think if KNG had kept his head together, he would have actually gotten into SK. He would have been a logical pickup, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, look, I think at this point, I think the Brazilian scene is sort of scrambling so much. I don't think it would really matter what KNG's done or said. I think we're going to get to a point where it's like that classic esports moment where desperation kicks in and all sins are forgiven. Yes. You know, you get past that point where judgment and punishment and penalties, the only people that really care are sort of extraneous to and periphery to esports. And I think KNG could very well somewhere down the line get a chance again to be an MIBR, because honestly, as we said on the last episode, what MIBR are doing just seems to be so not conducive to what the brand is meant to be about. So, but anyway, I mean, let's talk about Bits comeback in particular. You know, legendary in-game leader, a guy with like tenure, certainly wasn't particularly well established in CSGO, but I don't think you'll ever meet a 1.6 player or an experienced CSGO player that didn't respect what they thought he was going to bring to the table. A lot of people excited, myself included, to see what a great mind could do with all of these players. Well, listen, I've got a fucking feeling he bit off way more than he could chew. I don't think the players he had were ever the kind that were going to be receptive to in-game leadership. I think you basically had a group of players that just had their own ideas, and Bit was kind of like the fifth wheel, not really doing anything. Every time I saw now Tem Como, or as the community started calling them, NTC, noobs try Counter-Strike, they never looked like a fucking tactical team. They looked absolutely shit on every level. I mean, you know, once you remove the individual skill from these players, if there's no tactics there, things can get real ugly real fast. And yeah, this team looked abysmal pretty much every time I tuned in. They were losing to small, local Brazilian sides when they were playing those matches online. At LAN, they've never shone. And like people were always like, oh, give them more time, give them more time. They never achieved anything in a time frame that is a lot of teams' actual life cycles. They never even got to a peak, you know? So I just wanted to get some thoughts about this. I mean, for me, I can't imagine SK Gaming actually bite the bullet and pick these guys up now. And I think everyone should just, you know, shake hands. We had some good times, some bad times, and let's just pretend this team never happened. Let's all just fucking take the Men in Black memory ray, you know?
Well, especially because, like, think of the context of that tournament we referenced last time, that DreamHack Valencia, where we were talking about G2 not going that far. The team that came second at that was the Luminosity team. So what's ridiculous is, like, they might even be the best fucking Brazilian team for all we know. We've never seen them at an international tournament except for that. So yeah. It just shows how bad this team's been. I mean, I'm with you on the one that, like, if you actually look at the lineup of players, so many of these players have a history of being difficult to work with, not wanting to correct their mistakes. This is one of the reasons they've been cut from teams they've been in the past and why they haven't been always in the number one team in Brazil. It's nothing to do with skill. We know some of them are good players. Then you think of some of the other ones. Obviously, then there's also the background that some of them, admittedly, obviously the twins are gone, but some of them have the history of partying, of not taking the game very seriously. This is exactly the wrong personality type you want if you're going to bring back an old in-game leader who's known to be someone who runs the tactical system, who wants to establish himself that way, because what else has he got to offer? Like, he was, even in 1.6, he was never like a fragger or anything. He was just an in-game leader. Like, we accepted in-game leaders weren't going to frag back then. So, yeah, it just feels like the entire project was pointless, basically. I mean, I know you can't. Here's the thing. Obviously, this isn't technically the same lineup that the Hundreds Thieves was going to have at the major. So that doesn't change that. I still would have liked to have seen them play at that one major. I feel like, you know, just a one-off tournament might have been the right environment to see them in. But yeah, I mean, it just shows all around. I mean, the very fact that they couldn't even keep that lineup together, and now they go into this lineup, and then who knows what happens now? I mean, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. Like, let's say they do this removal that they're hinting at. Where does that put them? Who do they recruit instead? Like, it just feels like this is a project that's going nowhere, and I think they know that.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of tunnel in on two players in particular that I know you've talked about a lot down the years, done videos on. We'll get to Phelps. I know you're a fan of his talent, but we'll talk about FNX first. I don't think I've ever seen anyone commit career suicide to this degree. Like, I mean, at least with KNG.
It's a bit sore with this guy as well.
Yeah, no, I know. At least with
it's KNG, like he keeps getting brought back to life with the resuscitate, and he just like goes, "Oh, I'm back. Right, gin." You just come back to life, mate. Come on, take a week off.
Although, to be fair, one of the fucking things I hated about that remake of Casino Royale was when James Bond did that. You remember, he gets poisoned with the fucking drink, goes to his own car, defibrillates himself, and then comes in and goes, comes back to the table and goes, that last drink nearly killed me. I think I even stood up in the cinema and was like, fuck off, Bond.
Here's the thing. That
this is
movie,
unacceptable.
Like, I wasn't a fan of the remix anyway, but that one was egregious. Like, that scene where he's getting tortured and then he tries to mind game the guy, like, I'm making you whip my balls. I was looking around like, what? Why is no one laughing? That's not like banter. That's shit. That would be like if I went to an event and someone just beat the fuck out of me and I go, look here, what can you do? Just beat my ass. Like, it's not a comeback, is it? You're just getting your head kicked in. What a garbage movie that was.
Yeah.
In many ways, Casino Royale, the NTC of Bond movies.
Yeah, you're not far off. But look, so I want to talk about FNX, right? I mean, this is an experienced player, veteran player. He's 28 years old now. He ain't getting any younger. And you think back to when he was kind of in that Brazilian lineup, but the classic one that went on to be SK Gaming. You think about everything he was doing back then, great clutch play, was an integral part of their success as they were on the come up. A lot of rumors circulating, which I don't give any credence to, but there was a lot of rumors circulating about internal problems, maybe people overstepping some boundaries, how shall we say, outside of a professional setting. And again, I think they were just rumors. I don't think there was any substance to them. But, for whatever reason, started to argue with his teammates, started not to get along, and he decided to basically go all in on the idea that, no, fuck it, I'll play with the second string Brazilians, and they're going to be the guys that are going to elevate me. We can make it work. We can become the number one team in the world. Well, it didn't even work like that. I mean, keep in mind, there was a long time where he was just in free agency, not even fucking doing anything, which is absolutely criminal for a player of his skill caliber.
Well, he was technically on Immortals on the contract agreement. It's just he wasn't doing anything because they had him kicked off the team. You're right, yeah. People forget he just disappeared for like the better part of a year.
Yeah. And then, this was kind of like the lifeline, right? Well, done absolutely nothing, on an individual level. The team obviously didn't take off. This is a guy who's won 2 fucking majors. Like, he's just off the fucking grid.
Plus, it's one thing, right? If in this team, there was also tension, and he was like, like people are like, get your head in the game, get serious. But he's just been playing like shit. There's the biggest fucking crime. It is egregious how bad he's been. Like, if you're going to be like that, okay, because there's a few players in the game like that. We've referenced some of them. Shox is a famous example. The difference is, even Shox, at his most disconnected, playing the least, he'll still turn in a solid performance, And if he hadn't, that's how he'll get himself kicked out of teams, as has happened. So I don't know what FNX thought he was going to do just from what's going on the server. Like, you can make all these comments you want. Oh, people say I'm partying or whatever. Okay, so you were just straight stone sober and you garbage at the game. You can have that option if you want, mate. Always like to give people freedom of choice.
Yeah. And like you say, I mean, it was quite sad because I caught the back end of the Americans minor, which when they got eliminated by E United. Now, I'd said E United were my kind of dark horse pick. I think they got some good players. I talked a little about it on the podcast I did with Davey and Semphis, Pika's Advantage, great podcast, check it out. They just released it about 2 hours before we're doing this live. It's on the subreddit, go have a look. But we were talking about how, E United's problems are their best players online are their weakest players at LAN, and their ones that unimpress online are the strongest at LAN, and they kind of have this weird inverse dynamic going on, but I still think they've got some very good players. I'm a big fan of Moose. I think he's good. I think Relics is kind of like one of those players that kind of like...
He was always all right.
Yeah, I think he's one of those players who slipped through the cracks a little bit, that if he'd made some different career decisions or had slightly different opportunities, I think he becomes a bit more well-known. Ace, for me, doesn't pass the eye test online, but, he's generally very solid and reliable at LAN. So I kind of felt like United, could do it. But again, within the context of that lineup, which is basically a bunch of, young, inexperienced American players, beating 2-time major winners, guys like Phelps, and FNX within that game, it was fucking sad, dude. On the first map, 6 for 17. FNX. It's bonkers.
And plus, no matter, even if these United players end up going on to do something, now's when you should be able to catch them if you're a fucking veteran. Use your experience. Use the fact it's LAN, that they're still an inexperienced. That's exactly where, even if they're better than you, you use that to win the game, So the idea that like NTC's had nothing at any of these tournaments, it's actually a disgrace.
Yeah, oh no, it really is. And like I say, I can't imagine SK Gaming want to pull the trigger. But the other big talking point that comes out of this is, I mean, a bigger tragedy than FNX in a lot of ways. Well, probably in every way. At least FNX had a career to throw away. You know, he got to 28. He's had some good times. I'm sure he's set for life. No matter what he decides to do, he's made his money, right? Like, if he wants to waste the last couple of years of his good Counter-Strike playing time, you know, that's on him. But Phelps is 21, a phenomenal player, unbelievable talent, came so close to sort of being a breakout player, maybe on a par with coldzera and Fur, and you know, was part of that set, and it just didn't work out. And the reason I'm bringing him up to talk to you about is I think you made a tweet, might have been about 2 weeks ago, and you said, you know, NTC is a prison for Phelps, and now the question is, where the fuck does Phelps go? Like, he's so good. He could play on. You feel he could play on a top 10 team in the world for sure, but then you when you factor in the Brazilian issue, you know, the language barrier, maybe some travel issues, visa issues, so maybe he can't become an NA resident because of how that's all fucked up now. You know, I don't know, and I think we are witnessing one of the biggest wastes of talent I think I've ever seen in Counter-Strike history by him basically not being on a top team.
Oh, for sure. Like, first of all, yeah, he's a player where I remember when I heard he was going to get kicked from SK, it's actually something I remember I said back then is like, this is exactly the sort of player who today should be starting English lessons and doing their best to get there. Because even if, by the way, if you know how Counter-Strike works, where you go to LANs and people who just picked up English, like Virtus Pro, for example, who just picked it up just from being at LANs and talking to people online, they didn't even have formal education. It took them a year or two and they were massively advanced in English. So I've no doubt if you actually bought a fucking tutor like you could afford nowadays, you could get up to speed in probably 6 months to be a half decent and play in an international team, you know, because he's someone where it's obvious that's what he should be trying to do. He's got all this talent. Apparently he's willing to move outside of Brazil. If you could just learn a bit of English, I think that's fine, because one of the problems I see him having is even within the Brazilian scene, supposedly he's a bit of a weird guy, a bit reserved, and then in his own way, he has a bit of an ego. Well, that's the worst person to be. I can tell you from my own career in esports, the worst spot to put yourself in is no one really likes you. You're a bit standoffish. You're really good, but as a result, no one's going to pick you up because they don't know you. And then also, they're not going to do you any favors because you don't have like charisma. So you actually have you can only succeed from your talent then. Like, your talent has to be overwhelmingly good. So that's a terrible spot to put yourself in. You know, you look around the world, you see other people making it from connections, which by the way is a totally natural social thing to do.
Completely
or,
valid.
you know, being good but not having an attitude. There's always another famous one where the people who are talented look down on them like, oh, I'm better than that guy. Yeah, but he's not an arsehole. So people like to play, you know. Unfortunately for Phelps, he's somewhat painting himself into a corner and doesn't seem to be someone who's making any strides to get out of that situation. Because, yeah, I think of all this stuff of the teams who aren't SK basically not being at the top in CS, he's obviously the one that's the wasted talent. Because I have to say, from watching him play quite a lot since he was in that team back when they were, it had been when they were Temple Storm, I think was when I first noticed him.
Yeah.
This is a guy where it shows how so many fans on Reddit are from North America, and so naturally the North American talents always get praised. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I think Phelps is better than Stewie 2K, fucking Automatic, Tarek, all these guys. I think he's at very least on the same level, if not better. Admittedly, he hasn't had as much experience at the top level, so, you know, it's maybe a little bit unfair to some of them to compare. But I think in terms of raw talent, I think he's amazing. So it's just sad to me that there's no option for him. Like, what, is there no option in an NA team for him? Come on. This just feels like, of all the people, I'd like to fucking evac him out of there and just put him on a decent team, see what happens.
But here's what's crazy about that, right? Like, you know, you see people like KNG kind of getting second chances. You know, the
by all accounts, though, KNG, I've never met him personally, but he seems as though he's someone who has some level of personal charisma. Like, yeah, maybe in a bad boy sort of way or something, but he seems to have something that attracts people.
I'll tell you something. I watched an interview where he was talking about his upbringing. I can't remember who put it out, but he was talking about how tough it was. You know, like he kind of was in that situation where he had to make Counter-Strike work for him, or he
needed to like pay for his family or something.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what happened to his father, but there was some reason why that he was unable to sort of earn a salary. It reminded me a lot, actually, of I remember, there was a StarCraft player called Violet, not the first Violet, but the second Violet, that came along and was a talent we actually discovered at Cadred through a Korean journalist called Jeff Kim when he was like 14, 15. And he lived in a very poor part of Korea where the houses were kind of, mashed up together. And that a fire just gutted his house and his father was caught in it and had like 3rd-degree burns over 80% of his body and was like, in a real bad position. So all of a sudden, as a 15-year-old kid, Violet had to fucking step up and start getting paid from StarCraft because he couldn't go out and get a job. He was a kid. Obviously it's a little bit different with KNG, but I did watch that interview, and it's like we've always talked about. You can judge people on the surface in your interactions, but like, why do those interactions happen the way they do? And then you start looking into it a bit more. And I think KNG probably had a pretty tough upbringing. Maybe an analogous to something like what me and you have gone through, maybe even worse, right? So it's like I can sort of respect him being a little bit fucking fiery. He's just got to learn how to play the game. That was KNG's biggest problem. He doesn't understand that if you want to do it your way, you got to get to the point where people can't fuck with you first.
Yes, you got to have the fuck you money or the fuck you talent where just they have to play by your rules.
Yeah. So but like I say, you're right. I thought he was very charismatic in that interview, and it gave me a renewed perspective on him. Obviously, I don't think we're ever going to be pals, but it doesn't excuse like homophobia, obviously, but like. I can probably like respect some of the other stuff he did. I think he probably felt a bit attacked and assaulted by the community and wanted to lash out, and I can sort of identify with that. But you're right. So, you see guys like that getting second chances. I want to know what Phelps did to fucking Fallen, man, to not get the call. Like,
as far as I know,
for Phelps, it's insane.
As far as I know, this is basically like, these are just things I've heard, okay? So we'll never know the source of where they came from, but I don't say stuff that's just a rumor from some third-hand person. I'm not a Twitter journalist in that sense, right? What I heard was he's someone where his because this is one thing I always wondered about, because the rep when he even came up and was in Immortals, and everyone would say like, oh, is he ever going to be an SK? Because originally, remember, before FNX left, they always used to say like, oh, he'll never be an SK, actually, like in the Brazilian scene, he's really toxic and he's got a bad attitude. And I always used to think, what does that mean, though, bad attitude? Because whenever you watch him as a player, he's not a player who's screaming when he's in the game. He's not raging at people. If you ever see him in interviews or at events, he's very quiet. He stays with the other Brazilians. He's not one of those guys who goes out for drinks and talks to everyone. So I always thought, what are they meaning by like he's toxic, he's got a bad attitude? And apparently he's just one of those guys where when things are going well, it's like you can't sort of tell him he's done a mistake or something, or you can't get through to him that like you got to play differently or you got to fix it. He's just sort of like, no, I'm doing fine. So it's that sort of like, which to be fair, for an in-game leader, that is terrible. Like, and this is one of those reasons why, if you remember, I critiqued Elige back in the day after Simple left, because I also think like they're the sort of person who won't publicly get criticized because they don't express it in a manner that's like outwardly noticeable that they're being an arsehole. But like, for example, Elige's problem was he would basically just get in a huff in a game, and if he didn't like the way someone was going, he'd just sit there quietly playing. And you wouldn't know in the game anything was happening, but you wouldn't hear a comm, or he'd just sort of like he wouldn't fully buy into what you were doing. And in its own way, that can be really disruptive behavior. Like, that's the sort of thing that it's going to be a slow burner, but when that pisses you off enough, you're going to kick that guy out the same way you'll kick out the guy who's screaming in your face every game. So unfortunately, it sounds like it's some sort of weird mental disconnect with him as well. Again, what I'd love to know in his case is what his background is, because as you'll find with a lot of these players, because they don't just come from, they weren't just some kid who played Counter-Strike when they were 16 in Germany, just lived a totally normal middle-class life and then became a pro player because they were good. Most of them have some mad story as to how they got to the top and all the like circuitous route they went through in their life. So if you knew the context of it, you might be able to understand them better. You might understand what are they missing to become just a well-rounded professional. But sadly, that's one of the areas where that being such an alien culture to ours and us having the language barrier means you have to kind of speculate.
Yeah, I do want him to hopefully course correct. But I don't know where he goes now in terms to even get the guidance. Like, pretty much, if you're persona non grata to Fallen, you're going to struggle in the Brazilian scene. I mean, I think we can all assume that. And where are the where's the big brother mentality? Like, I see a lot of family and fraternity coming out of the Brazilian, teams. Like, we're in it, we're a unit, and I believe they do that, and they espouse that better than almost any other part of the world playing Counter-Strike. Like, it is fucking, ride together, die together shit with Brazilian Counter-Strike teams. It's great to see, but I don't see a lot of big brother mentality. Where people will put an arm around you and go, listen, you can't do that. It's like all the Brazilian players just get sort of like, told, like, you're just going to have to make your own mistakes. And if you fuck up, you get thrown to the wolves. There's nobody who's going to put their arm around you and go, listen, maybe don't do that. Maybe don't say that. Maybe simmer down. We exist in a world where, the best player Brazil's ever produced and the best in-game leader that Brazil's ever produced, they can't fucking get along. And there's nobody to sort of mitigate and stop that conflict. It's just a real shame, and like I say, I don't know where Phelps ends up from here, but I don't think it's a good place.
I actually agree with you the way they characterize the teams, because I have to say most of those teams, like, people are going to think this is a term that is somehow derisive. It's not. They have like a gang mentality, like they have that thing, because what they're trying to do is engender loyalty. And unfortunately, when you have that kind of loyalty and you're working on like we're friends basis, well, the problem is if your friend comes home and he's telling some story about his boss, you don't go like, yeah, but were you being an arsehole to him? Yeah, but what did you, aren't you sometimes like skipping out on work? You take his side. You go, oh, yeah, that sounds terrible. Yeah. Oh, it's all him, you're cool. Anyway, should we get a beer, because you don't have to deal with his problems in life. The difference is in a team, sometimes you got to have those people who can say, listen, you're fucking up. And if you keep doing this, you're going to be out the team. Whereas I get the feeling that just doesn't happen in the Brazilian team. I mean, apparently that seems to be one of the main reasons why Fallen's had to boot some of these guys out. It's just like they get to a point where they're not going to change. They're not going to listen to you. So it's like, right, once the results hit a certain threshold, you'll have to go. I'll start with someone fresh. Because that's why it's drastic. If someone with skill gets kicked from a team. Yeah. Because if you kick someone like that, what that's saying is it's going to be such hard work to change your mentality. I'll just start with a brand new player. I have to start all over again in the team. So the only chance I see for Phelps now is kind of alluding to before with like the desperation move that can sometimes happen in Counter-Strike. The only way I can see him coming back, unless he does what I said and starts learning English, gets on an NA team or international team, is he's got to wait until the inevitable breakup of that core of SK happens, MIBR now, and something like a Fur or a Coldzera leaves. That's when it's possible you can make it up with Fallen again, and you can be the guy that he now molds into his new superstar. But obviously that's going to take like some lessons learned from Phelps, and then obviously a drastic scenario for Fallen to even need that as an option, because he doesn't at the moment.
Yeah, it makes me think that the potential savior of all things Brazilian right now could be Zeus.
I've often thought so, because actually if you look at what happened in the team, literally no joke, the team fell apart like 2 months after he fucking left or something, and they keep saying we don't need no coach. It's like, no, but you know what, to use your analogy, you need a fucking bigger brother. You need someone who will actually who knows all of you on a one-to-one basis, can take you aside separately and say, oh, listen, that guy's being an arsehole, but you know what, he just means this and he wants the best for us, that's like a really important role of a coach that I think almost doesn't exist. The only coaches I could guess do that is I would say Zeus, Zonic, maybe Robban, those are the only guys who I think maybe fit that role, because the rest of them are just basically ex-in-game leaders who are just playing sort of like a limited coach, a limited sort of analyst role, aren't they?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels between Zeus and Zonic, and it's probably quite telling that actually Zeus, despite having all that success with Brazilian players he came up with, he made the decision to go to NA and go over there, and perhaps that's quite telling in and of itself. Maybe that's something that we'll find out a bit more about. Maybe he's got some plans, maybe it's been rumored that he might be going back and working on an MIBR or something like that, when he's had health problems come up just before E-League. So who knows? I guess we'll get into that next week. But anyway, let's move on. Talk about the American minor. We'll start with the big story coming out of this, NRG. I made this point on the other podcast, so I'm going to repeat myself. I think it's fucking weird, right? NRG make it to the final of Star Series. They go out there with play Na'Vi. I'm a Pet had been in the team, 4 days, and everyone's like, I'm a Pet, he's done it, it was the coaching, Imi was terrible, all hail, I'm a Pet. And then they went to ECS, and they beat FaZe in a best of 1, and G2 in a best of 1, and then they lost to Liquid in a best of 3. But everyone was like, oh yeah, but look at the teams they beat in a best of 1, all hail, I'm a Pet. Then they go to the minor, They are surrounded by teams they should be beating now that they're established international team with some of the best young talent in North America. And apparently they got a fucking lights out coach, right? I mean, that's what everyone was saying. And they absolutely shit the bed. I mean, there is more shit than bed in this performance. And no one goes, maybe we were a bit, maybe we jumped the gun a little bit on that coach, you know, maybe actually now. And it was funny because Davey was even talking about how they fucked up their vetoes, which for me, that all stems from the coach, right? But what the fuck do I know? But I'll just say this. I thought NRG, this is like a sort of cataclysmically bad performance that they don't come through the North American minor. This is the kind of thing that can really instill like what they call in snooker, the yips, you know, where you can't ever, you can never hit your shots properly again because you always got some fucking, you know, demon that you're wrestling with. There is no way they should be losing to the teams that they lost here. All respect to Complexity, who won it. Congrats, we'll talk about that. But this should have been a fucking layup for NRG.
No, it's outrageous because actually this is what people might not realize is this is one of the first times that I think the Americas minor has been actually pretty fucking whack. Like this was basically NRG and that's it. Like it didn't matter which of the other two names you put in there, the other one name you added. Like it doesn't fucking matter. They're not going to do anything at the LAN and no one expects anything from them. So, you know, in the past, the difference was sometimes you'd have very good teams. Immortals. Cloud9's been in America's minors, remember? Yeah. You know, these were like top teams that were having to play through them each time because they got knocked out the major call for Team Liquid. What the fuck's going on that this team, where it's arguably the easiest of the minors that they've ever had in NA, and they come fourth? And remember, this is the key thing. There's no complaints. You lost in a double elim best of 3 bracket.
Yeah.
If you can lose, I always say this is why I've told this to tournament organizers. If you want the secret shortcut cheat to me not complaining about your format, make as much of it best of 3 as you can. Because I'll never complain about someone losing a best of 3 in general. Like, you know, unless it's like, you know, by 1 round, then I'll say like, you know, maybe the other team wasn't conclusively better. But if you lose a best of 3, and especially if you lose 2 best of 3s, sorry, that like, what more do you want? You don't deserve to be there. You have objectively shown you have not of the caliber to get out of this tournament. It's not that you had, you know, I got an unlucky Swiss system draw. I got the best team at first, and you know, the map pool went a bit dodgy, and it was 19-17 overtime. No, you straight up lost 4 maps out of 6 or whatever. Like, you know, like that's enough for me. You underperformed massively. Maybe the other teams played better. I don't know. But when they have no context internationally, we can't speculate that. We have to just go ahead and assume you absolutely shit the bed and you were like a solid 80% of why you're not at the major.
Yeah, I mean, like it was an interesting series they lost against Complexity, which was the first series they lost. You know, it was an overtime win on Train for Complexity that basically kept Complexity in it. And it kind of looked like to me that when it went on to Inferno, which we know NRG can play, you know, and there was a bit of a problem actually in this. Like NRG took out Nuke, right? Well, if you look at, I'm not saying it's a map that they might go to immediately, but if you look at NRG's results on Nuke, pretty solid. They've had some decent wins, decent victories on Nuke, including its Star Series, not ancient history, right? But they took Nuke out and left, and so Inferno was left. NRG, you know, their destiny was in their hands there, and they got battered on Inferno. 16-8, you know, after almost getting the 2-0 on Train. So you say, okay, maybe that's a mentality issue. You know, maybe that's like they just lost it a little bit psychologically. There was no excuse with the E United defeat. Nuke comes out first. NRG won Nuke, right? Which again kind of justifies the thing I was saying earlier. And then they took out Train and sort of left Dust 2 in, which is what Davey was saying was their big mistake. And they got wrecked on Dust 2. It was 16-5 against the United. Like, Moose absolutely tore them a new one. It was insane. And it's like, you just look at the teams that they lost to here in terms of strength and depth. There is just no way this should have happened. And, you know, Daps obviously was meant to be on that podcast. You know, and jump in, and he wasn't there. He didn't. That they're doing some soul searching right now off the back of that minor issue. So I don't know. I mean, like, I don't want them to make any knee-jerk reactions. I don't want them to make any changes. Absolutely not. But certainly, I think again, all the praise that was heaped on their coach, just looking at their vetoes, I don't know who's to blame, whether it's, I'm a Pet's meant to be the very analytical coach. He's the guy who watches all the demos and comes with the game plan. So I don't know if it is Daps or if it's I'm a Pet, but someone fucked up. And it was the classic veto fuck up. They were playing maps they shouldn't have been playing and losing them, and not just losing them closely, losing them convincingly. So I don't know where NRG kind of go from there. Just madness, how bad it was. Absolute madness.
The upside for NRG is that at least they're a team where, if you look at the star players, they are really young. I think Cirque and Ethan are 18. Breezy's not that far off, like the one upside is, unlike a lot of teams in Counter-Strike where you've got known quantities, this is a team that if you just keep the lineup together could actually get better in 3 months, purely just from more experience gained, players getting a bit older, a bit more mature. That could be the factor that helps take you to the next level. But I agree, when you consider that they're actually a fairly solid team from top to bottom. It's like they're being carried by one player. The supportive elements of veterans who played in the scene a long time, you can rely on them. Yeah, it does feel as though, like if you're I'm a Pet, if anything, this is one of the teams where you make your name with again. Now you've got the players who aren't all super established. Now if they have the big results, you are going to get those credits for upsets, as you did, as you said there, where you did at Star Series, etc. So, yeah, there's some colossal fuck-ups going on behind the scenes here.
Yeah,
because if you actually watch the games, it's not even like, some player had a shit LAN and terrible stats or whatever. Everything looked on course for it to go as you'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, this should have just been a slam dunk. I agree with you. I think this is one of the weakest NA minors I've ever seen. Especially when you take into account like the teams at the bottom end. I love Ryan, right? But Swole Patrol, come on, you know what I mean? Come the fuck on. Furia were in there. NTC, Dignitas. These are all free fucking wins. These are free wins for anyone. These are free wins for fucking if James Bardolph put a fucking team together. You know what I mean? These are just really not.
By the way,
yeah. What?
Since you mentioned Furia, they have that player who's like from 1.6. His name is Spacker.
Yeah,
I know. I've never even made a joke about it, right? I just see it though, and I just go, "How can that exist?" In the modern day, when people say there's no context allowed, come on,
I know.
Come on.
But this is what I mean, isn't it? It's like, this is how you know it's not the middle to upper class UK that dictate what words are forbidden forever anymore. Because I grew up with that as a fucking. It's not a nice thing to call somebody.
Wild.
Yeah, and he's rocking that name. Don't get me wrong. There've been worse names out there professionally, which have changed.
Worse names for knives from some professional players. Looking
Indeed.
at you, Zeus. Might just bring that up again. If you want to talk shit, maybe we'll just. You know what? I think maybe someone with the role of like esports historian, so could probably dig some of that up. Some screenshots from tournaments and that. Don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Maybe you should. I would endorse that. I would endorse that after, he wanted to be the next fucking Spielberg. But anyway, so let's talk about the teams that got through, right, in the minor. And obviously, first of all, Has-Beens United managed to do it, which is fucking mental in the form of Rogue. And obviously, I love Spencer, but I kind of just felt like, maybe streaming beckoned and all that. And even when he was on Rogue, it was more like a symbolic thing. It wasn't like a real, kind of team. And then obviously Cadian's on there. And I really like Cadian. Good guy, great to have a beer with, great to hang out with. But again, you kind of feel that their window has, closed a little bit. And it's great that they're still playing for fun. Ricky's on that team. Say no more. I kind of feel that, if you're getting passed around the Australian scene and you can't find a home, I mean, say no more about that. And then obviously, the two kids that I felt probably should have had better careers. I think Sick is a good player. I think Vice is a good player. And again, they just never got the breaks, kind of how it works sometimes in NA politics. But so when I looked at this team going into the minor, I was like, we'll enjoy it. We'll get some great moments, some great highlights. But realistically, they have no chance. Well, they made it all the way to the fucking final and are going to, and have come through the minor, which is great for all of them, seriously, mad happy that, that they'll be there. But I was massively surprised at how well Rogue performed. I'm not going to lie.
Well, that's the thing about the team is that, to be fair, when you break them down, the main reason all these players are available and in this squad It's because they all have some reason, like politically, basically, as to why they're not in better teams. Like, obviously, here's the stupid thing about Hiko. This is someone who absolutely could have either like had much better teams the last year or so, or even made his way back to the pro scene. It's just that he'll even tell you, because he's spent the last 3 or 4 years constantly preaching the message that like, oh, it's the end of my career, it's got to be like a team that could contend for titles if I'm going to keep playing, because he's pushed that angle so hard, and also he wants to get paid. There's not many options at that point in time. What he should have done is gone down to an NRG before they became as good now and worked his way back up again, got a couple of young talents. That's, if he'd have been willing to grind, he could have maybe made it back again. Instead, he's left himself in this situation where, okay, He's had to get lucky that these players have gradually joined. Cadian joined, then later on Ricky joined. For people who don't know about Cadian, because I've often mentioned this, that in terms of actual skill, he's a pretty decent player. Here's all you need to know about Cadian, right? So the Danish scene, obviously fabulous amount of talent. They've all been in many different teams. Famously, in the early days of CSGO, I think End of Source, there used to be some Facebook group that was all Danish players in the active scene, and the name of the group was like "fuck Cadian" or something. The only thing they could all agree upon was "fuck this guy." So that's all you need to know about where he was coming from. Like at that point, you better be fucking simple, or it's just not going to work out for you.
So I think the thing that he probably did that also kind of contributed towards his rep being a little bit weird among pros and the community.
It's just going to be the photos.
Yeah, he did post them nude photos of himself on his Twitter, didn't he?
He posted pictures of him and a friend of his, like drunk in sort of like a fucking jacuzzi together or something. Yeah. And all they had was like, it was almost like he was posing for something. They had like the bubbles.
Yeah, it was like a photo
covering their genitals. It was like, what is this? What is the message you're trying to send here? Because he sent in a message. I don't know if you're aware of that. And he was just like, ha ha. It's one of those things where it's like, why would you do that while you're drunk? Just get off Twitter. As if Sadakist retroactively could have taught us anything, it's that you don't do things intoxicated on Twitter.
Well,
or social media in general.
Yeah. I think as well, it's like, why have I seen Alu's testicles? Then
again, though, I have told you that one, which is that this is the thing about him. He's the only one who's come through that without it touching him. Because first of all, because his persona is so mysterious, because he's so quiet, he makes it work for him as sort of a legendary thing. And I've said this before, the story of when I went up to him, and I did say to him once, like a year or two after, I said, that photo's still online. Like, fair enough that people will post it, but just delete the tweet. And then he did say, he just goes, but then I lose. And I that, understandable. Yeah, have a nice day, right? Like, he actually mind fucked me to the extent I didn't have a comeback to that. Like, well, you got me on that one. So.
Fucking checkmate, fucker. Yeah, no, he's a fucking legend, mate. But you're right. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, I think it's almost okay. Like, you can be, again, it's sort of similar to the KNG situation. When you hit a certain point where you want to kind of be eccentric and different and do wild shit, right? Like, when you do it, of course, man, make yourself stand out, build that brand. But when, like you say, you're kind of ostracized by your domestic scene, I'll just post this nude photo shoot of myself, see how that goes over. You're a Counter-Strike player, mate. You're a Counter-Strike player. You're not a model.
Plus, he does have that problem, which I can absolutely identify with, which is he also does every now and then. It hasn't happened often, so the last few years he's been pretty good for this. But I notice every now and then he will do the tweet that's complaining about something, which is an absolutely valid point. But it's like sometimes certain complaints can't come from you, because obviously in his case, people just say, "Well, you're shit," or you're just bitter that you're not in this team or whatever. So that's one of those examples of where, like, what you're talking about is totally legit. You made a good point about, like for example, I think he's one of those people where I've seen him do tweets that'll be like, say some team gets mega overrated because of one result. He'll say something like, actually they're not as good as that. But it's like, all you're doing, bear in mind, he's trying to be a pro player. I can do it because I'm trying to be a personality to some degree. But in his case, if all you're going to do there is make people think you're salty, unfortunately. And as a pro player, generally, if people would interpret what you're going to tweet as you're being salty, it's probably just not worth doing. Because generally, unfortunately, PR is you want to present a positive image all the time,
But like I say, back to the games, moving away from nude photo shoots and finished testicles. These guys, did really punch above their weight. They had a, very high level of performance. And I was actually pleasantly surprised. They had some legit results within the context of the teams they were facing. You know, they had to beat E United, who were on a tear, and as I said, I had them picked as my kind of dark horse, you know, for the whole event. So yeah, you know, I mean, they were able to. They had a win actually over Complexity before they got to the final, as well, which was a legit win. So yeah, very very pleasantly surprised. Now, obviously, at the major, you know, as it is now, definitely not going to do anything.
Slim pickings for sure.
Yeah. But it's going to be good to see them there, and it'd be interesting to see if they could sort of build on this, get a bit of momentum going. But I think more than likely, the reason they're so happy is stickers, you know.
I also think, to be fair, if you look at this squad, since NA is in such a mess in terms of the situation it's in, it's not even unreasonable. This is a team where you make one roster move and then you're actually not bad. So as long as they keep themselves poised, land results will always matter. Like we were saying before about teams in desperate situations. If you beat teams on LAN, it doesn't matter if they didn't like you and they think that you're an idiot and they, you know, whatever. Eventually, that becomes an option in their mind. Do I join his team? Does he join mine? That'll happen.
Yeah. So, and obviously the winners, Complexity from sort of nowhere, I guess. I mean, here's
all you need to say about Complexity, Rich, is they have a player called Def who plays from the UK.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember what everyone kept saying at ESL One Cologne? Finally, the UK has a credible player. The UK is on the map. Now, he's been playing in Complexity for 2 years, guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I'm going to say about that. Context speaks all the volumes I need on that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, what also is interesting is if you think about it, you know, we talked about this move when it first happened, you know, Shazam and Stanislaw going to Complexity, and we were like, yeah, this is going to be an upgrade for them. They've got some good players, get to see Complexity bringing them in. But I mean, like, real talk, since then, it didn't really, you know, hasn't really worked out for them. You know, they've had a couple of showings. I'm trying to think which events it was. They went to a
DreamHack,
and very poor. But this was, again, different, you know, a very different Complexity. I mean, I'll say that, you know, maybe beating Rogue, that might be a 50-50 game on any given Sunday. But, you know, the win over NRG is legit. You can't take that away from them. Absolutely not. The win over E United is legit. So I was very surprised to see them win the whole thing. I mean, I kind of feel that this is very much a work in progress, this Complexity. There's players on the roster that I think if the new funding that Jason Lake has got goes to where I think it's going to go, I don't think they'll be there. I think there's some players that will kind of get cut from this roster just as eventually, you know, they've been there a while. Jason's a loyal dude, wants to give these players a chance now that the money's come in and Stanislaw's there. But yeah, I think honestly, like, there'll probably be one or two changes. I don't know who it would be. But certainly Def performed here. I don't think he's going to be on the chopping block anytime soon, but you are right. It's his first performance in a fucking...
The one I think's legit from the games I've seen and some like clips when people have taken clips from streams and stuff is that Android guy. Like, he actually seems to be a reasonably skilled player, but I get the sense from other NA players, because every now and then, you know, I'll ask people, what do you think of this player? I get the sense he's another example of someone who's done a terrible job networking. Like, people just don't know him. I think he's a bit weird or something. So to be fair, when I look, since it says he's 24 years old and he's from Canada, like... could just be fucking nobody, couldn't he? You know, you got to. People don't realize this. Like, I've always said this to NA players, especially. You are in the biggest talent pool in the whole world. Yeah. Remember, your scene has all these teams salaried. So your main skill, if you're going to work on something, like obviously work on being good at the game, but as your hobby, you should be working on your fucking social skills, like how to talk to people. There's a certain book all of you could read, Win Friends and Influence People. I'm not even joking. Like, this would literally like amplify whatever skills you've got so much, because obviously your entire scene is politics, and it's about getting the top teams and players to not only think you're good at the game, but want to play with you. If you do that, the world is your oyster. You don't even have to be actually like some fucking god tier talent. You just have a bit of skill. Don't be an arsehole, and then figure out how to just befriend people, get in contact with them, have a positive rapport. I say that because they all just still to this day just talk mad shit to each other all the time, which is like, that's literally the opposite of winning friends and influencing people. That's winning enemies and being a cunt.
A new book.
And take it from me. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So look, let's talk about the Asian minor as well, because I'm glad I finally was able to win you over for a change and make you see some sense on the issue of Ty Lue. Because we've done many a show, Duncan, and I've been like, yeah, Ty Lue, I'm gonna be super excited. Well, you can't have much of a life, can you, Richard? If you get excited by Ty Lue, and then it's like, they do well at a tournament. Yeah, well, let's see how they do it the next one. All right, okay, cool. And then they do well at the next one. Yeah, well, it's who bloody cares, And now finally, after like what feels like a year of me banging on about how Ty Lue can be good, you finally won you over. You realize Ty Lue are sick, and they've qualified through the Asian Minor after losing the final against Renegades. We're going to talk about Renegades in just a moment, but super happy for them. Ty Lue is a team. I'm being legit when I say this. I like watching Ty Lue. I think Ben Tet is fucking sick. Mo was back. Listen, I made a joke, because obviously it's a Chinese team and there's just all sorts of shady shit going on over in the Chinese scene, that when Mo was injured, I was like, motherfucker ain't it. Nah, he did turn up in a wheelchair. Like, fair enough, you are selling it. So unless his personal fucking lawyer is Saul Goodman and they're going for a fucking compensation payout with a neck brace, yeah, okay, fair fucks. This guy was really fucked up. And he's come back. It's his first tournament back. The wheelchair was in the background while he was playing, and back captain in his side to win, still, as you'd expect, a little bit under-leveled in terms of personal performance. But they just got some fucking sick players on this team. And the talismanic player was obviously Ben Tet, and then Accurate, or however the fuck you want to pronounce it, had a great performance as well this tournament. So super happy. Can't wait to see them at a major. And as I said, because they're an orthodox style, and the fact that they've got Ben Tet, who was seriously, for me right now, like I might go as far as to say, if not a top 10 player in the world, knocking very firmly in the top 20, I would say. I'm going to say it.
Enthusiastic. You can describe that as.
I'm going to say it, mate. I'm going to say it very, very firmly in the top 20 in terms of personal level of performance. If you took this motherfucker and put him on FaZe, everybody would say this cat was legit. Like, I'm telling you, everyone would say this guy's one of the best.
The mad thing people don't realize is, because him and Excurate or whatever are from like Indonesia, I've spoken to them. They can speak English. Obviously, they don't speak Chinese. The mad thing is, these two players should actually, at some point in the future, potentially be an option for a Western team, NA team, Tier 2 Europeans. It should actually be someone they could consider as long as they're willing to move. Because, yeah, they absolutely speak English. No, the good thing about this team, I think, is, first of all, it's like the big problem the old Ty Lue had, the one that first broke out and beat Luminosity and everyone wanted to get hyped, understandably so, because of that sick result, was that team actually did have good firepower, but that was the only thing they had. Like, when I actually watched them, like I saw them play at the minor after that, they had no sense of how the global meta of Counter-Strike is played. Yeah. Like, when they would play all the different maps, because they were just tearing everyone up on every map at home, they didn't even understand like which map suited them. The difference with this Ty Lue is this Ty Lue has really good firepower as well. In fact, top to bottom, some pretty decent players. But they've actually also got, like, as you say, a unique style. Like, they don't just play and go, right, we've got more skill and we beat everyone in every map anyway. No, they've been to enough tournaments now that they've been bedded in. They've got quality players. They actually, what I like is the fact that they've kind of made this like unique style of play contrasted to everyone else. Yeah, it means they're like a matchup problem for people if you haven't played them before. I always say this: if you notice, their best results always come the first time they play someone, because if you haven't played that style, it's all well and good on paper thinking you know what you're going to do, but this is something a lot of pro players say is like, it doesn't matter how much you watch someone, you don't know what it's like to actually be in the server against them and then like see what happens. Because then sometimes moves that you think are like, oh, that's not a very good move, if you don't expect it in the game, or your brain's telling you, no, I shouldn't do that, like according to what I'm trained to do, yeah, it throws you off. It's weird. So I'm looking forward to seeing them at the major. I don't like they're actually gonna have a good result, but they're upset bait. Like, they're actually legit chance to win a map, to do something, especially when you consider it's obviously a Swiss system, so that makes anything possible to a degree.
Yeah, and like people in the chat are going like, you're fucking going way too ham over Ben Tet, right? Well, go
obvious question: who do they support? I mean, they're probably the sort of cretins who think that like fucking, I don't even know that like. I can't even think of a shit player that they would like. Whoever they like, shit. There you go. Good man. You've done it, Doug. But no, like, legit, right? Go watch the. Not really, not the best performance. I can't lie.
You like shit? Got him.
Yeah, got him. These nuts, mate.
These mad clubs have got a really low quality now.
Right. But like, straight up, go watch that match against Na'Vi where he drops 57 frags on fucking, the team that won the fucking tournament on day one, right? Unreal level of performance. This motherfucker will rip you to pieces on overpass. Like, that's where he always like has his best performances. He's dropped 30s against like I think NIP. He's dropped 30s again. Like, this is a guy who can legit hang with European players and not just hang with them in like, he gets 15, he gets 20, he does his job. Like, if he goes off, this guy goes off. Like, I'm telling you.
And remember, he's playing in a team with people who are fucking Chinese speaking English and they barely speak English.
Yeah.
So obviously he's not getting sick comms, is he? Like, when I always used to make this comment in the past, one of the problems I always had with Coldzera is that by all accounts, his team had some of the best comms in the world. Well, if you're a fucking late round player who wants to win clutches and you're already smart and got really nice skills, having perfect comms is like plus 20 to your fucking game. Like, what a great aspect to have. It's one of the reasons I think actually the team's been worse now. So this guy's working in arguably the worst circumstances you could of a top 20, top 30 team, So fair fucks to him that he's doing what he's doing at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, like I say, just because of his existence being on the team, I'm gonna say.
Oh, nice on G2, mate.
No, I'm gonna say that he gives Ty Lue a legit chance.
I will say this though.
How they play him.
I will say this though, right? We've all seen a picture of Ben Tet, right?
Yeah.
He does remind me of that fucking Rick and Morty episode where there's heads turn up like, "Show me what you got." Yeah. Go and have a look. He has that chin.
He has got a very masculine jawline. There is no doubt about it. But yeah, so like seriously, I'm psyched about Ty Lue making it. And like just his existence on the team is for me going to give them the upset opportunity, depending on how they kind of come out. And a lot of people were laughing at me saying like, yeah, you fucking fat idiot, you don't know anything about. I watch Ben Tet play all the time. If he was on a better team. This guy, everyone would be raving about this.
As guy. I said, do remember the last major, we had Quantum Bellator Fire make the round of 8. So as I said, at this point in Swiss system, I think almost anything is possible. Yeah. I've seen shit you people wouldn't believe. I'm not trying to go Roy Batty on you here. I could make so many jokes of that word alone, but okay, I don't want to unnecessary time stamps for yourself. Yeah.
Roy Batty.
No, but here's the thing. Like, I'll say it. Everyone was raving about Boomic. Like, Ben Tet's better than Boomic.
He's better than everyone on the team.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Like, so just saying. Like,
here's an example. Okay, I've got the example of the player that everyone raved about the whole time and told me was going to be sick. May from Vega Squadron. There you go. Tell you what, Ben Tet plays in a worse situation than May has ever been in. He's about twice the player.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about who won it. Renegades winning the Asia Minor. Who saw that coming? Got to love, again, the cynical use of the Australian nationals to be able to get to the major every time. Just want to bring that up again. Keep saying it.
Joking it.
Yeah, no, it's fucked up, man. I mean, I don't know what the solution to the problem is, but it is what it is. So fair play. But they were probably the best team here by some distance. Obviously, we all know how good they are. Nifty continues to evolve as an in-game leader and as a fragger as well. But yeah, they looked a very well-rounded team. Not the best opposition they were ever going to go up against, but they look comfortable throughout the tournament. And obviously, we get to see them probably underperform at the major very soon.
As is tradition.
Yeah, as is tradition. So
the only upside for them is that nowadays the major qualifier is just the first part of the major. So congrats, you've made the major now, boys. You don't have to fail at the fucking major qualifier like every single time I ever saw you.
Yeah, and here's what I will say. The good news about their sort of performance through this is JKS was very, very good in pretty much every game they played, or certainly every game I saw, which is great news. I mean, like JKS is one of the players that has really been missing from this Renegades lineup. And when you talk about the problems that the Renegades lineup has had, it's that there was a brief period of time, another one of those like windows where we're all watching JKS and we're like, wow, he's the clutch master. He can do this, he can do that. Very good numbers, really good game sense. This guy's legit. And then he just went missing. He just fell off the face of the earth and became a very ordinary player that had occasional flashes of brilliance. Now, it's like the old adage, form is temporary, class is permanent. Well, he's coming into form at what appears to be a very good time for them, at least. And we'll find out whether or not he is going to be able to sort of permanently transition into the player we all thought he could be. But That for me is the real talking point coming out of this. That JKS is kind of back. I don't know if you saw any of the games.
I watched the final. The thing about this team is, like, as you said, they were the best team there. Like, I was actually shocked when I was watching the results online. And I saw that they were in, like, the fucking lower bracket. So I was like, fair enough. But I lost that game to, who the fuck was it? Like, it was like some Japanese team or something mental they lost to at the beginning of the tournament. So they're a team where, like, the problem with Renegades at the moment for me is they're stuck in that no man's land where they're like good enough to make all the tier 1 lands. They're good enough to maybe get an upset, but they're not a team that's going to go far in any competition. So it's a bit underwhelming in that sense. Like, I realize for them, that's actually a step up from where they used to be. You know, they used to be eternal disappointments, but they are, as good as they are at this level, they are still just lacking something when it comes to the top level. They haven't really got like a superstar player. Obviously, their in-game leader's still pretty inexperienced. As a team, they know this. They're all mardy cunts. They're all just fucking mad, like, oh, bloody ass, we lost the game. It's like, come on, man, have some fucking confidence, etc. At least believe in yourself.
Yeah, I think as well, you know, I'll say this, that they've been experimenting with in-game leadership. I don't know if Nifty still is or not, but I think they've been swapping it around. They've kind of hit that wall, so I'll throw that out there. I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly for now on paper, let's say it was Nifty and whatnot. But yeah, so that's the Asian minor out of the way. I mean, not really a lot to talk about outside of that. It kind of went the way I expected. You look at it on paper, you expect Tyloo to come and Tyloo and Renegades to come through, right? That's just how it goes.
Tell you what, though, Sam must have been a fan of the Asian minor because there's a player there for a Japanese team whose alias is Take J.
Well,
that's what Sam does. He takes
J's. That's not bad, not bad.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't seen him.
It's a slow burner, much like Sam with his J's.
Yeah, with his
keep it going.
With his blunts, mate. He's fucking. My house has never smelt so good. So we'll talk about some of the news that's been going on in the scene. There's a couple of other bits and pieces that we didn't get time to sort of go into in the last episode. And obviously the EU minor's ongoing right now, so we'll leave that. We won't talk too much about that. And then we'll do a DreamHack Valencia quick hit, and then we'll get out. But some of the news that happened, we've often talked in very glowing terms about Rubinho on this show, and weird situation happening over at Heroic. Just very bizarre. We know Rubinho missed like a few events because he had what he said was an eye infection, like conjunctivitis or something, and it was affecting his ability to...
I like the way we've gotten to the point where, because so many cunt pro players have lied about injuries, you're having to go, what allegedly was some sort of like... We've gotten to that point where we can't even believe it. I know what you mean, but
you never know, do you? I mean, like, you know, I always see these fucking health problems, and it's like the motherfuckers are on a team the next day. It's like
the worst is apparently, from what I was told, especially like in the Overwatch League, that is literally the excuse they give when you need a break, when like you just can't handle it. They just lie and say, "Oh, he's ill." Because I kept saying, "How were there fucking like 2 players ill every week? What's going on?" They were like, "That's what they say, like reasonable."
Yeah, I just realized as well, I made him Brazilian. I did that thing again where I call him Rubinho instead of just Rubinho.
I think it's just because you used to love Ribena as a kid.
No, it's actually, it's growing up in Middlesbrough when they had that team with fucking Juninho and Emerson and fucking Ravanelli and all of the boys.
Ravanelli was a beast, mate. 30 goals, still got relegated.
Yeah, I know, right? True story. When I was living in Middlesbrough at the time, right? I went to, do you remember Spar? The like local SPAR, the local shops, right? I don't think they exist anymore. But anyway,
but they actually have some in the Netherlands, believe it or not.
No fucking way.
Isn't it? Yeah, because I walked past one, I was like, "What is that?" And it's the same brand, but I don't think they have it in the UK anymore.
No, I think it died out or got amalgamated into one of the supermarkets or something, you know. But anyway, I was queuing up in my local Spar just to buy like some fucking snacks or whatever, and in front of me is Fabrizio Ravanelli, right? There's no joke. Well, I thought, who's this old grey-haired cunt when I was holding up the line, and it was Ravanelli, right? And he was just beeping through like 2-liter bottles of Coke, but he bought like 100 of them or something. He was beep, beep, just holding the whole line, and he turned around and he said to me something I'll never forget, Duncan, as long as I live. He turned around and he looked at me and he went,
"You suck dick for Coke?"
No, it wasn't that. He literally just turned around and he looked at me and he just went, "Coke." and then like went back. That's the true story.
The most elaborate Coke salesman of all time.
Yeah. Like he just turned around with a big grin and went Coke, and that was that. That was my.
You should have just said, "Yeah, it's the real thing."
Yeah, and he used to play darts in a. This is true as well. This is no joke. He'd never played darts before. And when he discovered darts, he thought...
Are you sure this wasn't Phil the Power Taylor and you've got him mixed up, mate? This is
how the fuck would I mix up that fat cunt with Fabrizio Ravanelli? But he absolutely loved darts, and he never played darts before. It's not obviously culturally something they do in Italy. And he used to go into a boozer in Middlesbrough called the Wellington, affectionately known as the Welly. I'm sure you know it. And you would find Ravanelli in there on a weekend playing darts against random people. He just loved the game of darts.
180.
I mean, also a guy doing that wasn't just in a pub.
I had someone to do it.
They didn't
I'll
get
give you 4 bottles of Coke for you to scream 180 every time I throw darts.
Fucking Tony from Bullseye's just stood there. Take your time. We want you to win, Ravanelli.
You do know that is absolutely his plan as well. In case like the apocalypse happens, he's just got 100 bottles of Coke in some basement somewhere. Well, at least I'm going out the way I lived with Coke.
Drinking Coke. Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. I've never seen a professional footballer drink like.
You'd think they'd get someone else to go to the shop for him as well, wouldn't they? Not like, oh, bloody hell, I'm going to go nip out to Spa, get 100 bottles.
He was, the white feather, mate. He was just a wild motherfucker. Anyway, so, right. Robinho, not Juninho, Robinho, the Brazilian Norwegian. So he had this eye infection. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I guess we don't really know. But we were saying this was a great move. You know, like Heroic have got themselves a great player here. Robinho could have been on a much better team. Well, it just didn't last. He got on the team, played a tournament, was kind of up and down in terms of performance, as you'd expect when you just join a team. Then he was out for 2 months with a fucking eye infection, and then he was off the roster. And the crazy thing is, you know, as I brought up on the last episode, the guy replaces him as a Cillian. Now, I've made mistakes before. If you think the Ben Tet thing is wild, I did say I thought Cillian could have been the next big player to come out of Denmark at one point. So
this is like 3 or 4 years ago, though.
Yeah, it was when he was in Reason Gaming. So I'll hold that L with my very few collection of L's. You know, like the time I said League of Legends will never be a big esport. That's another L. Yeah, that's a pretty big
good
L.
one. Like that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty big L.
Tell you what, this won't take off. This is shit. Daughter for life, I reckon.
literally said that right at an ice.
Here's the thing: when I'm playing Hon 10 years from now, you little cunts will realise your game was never going anywhere.
That's what it was, right? What happened was I was at a iSeries event, right? And Joe Miller was there. And D-Man was there, right? Now, I knew D-Man back from when he used to be a fucking, you know, drinking, partying Call of Duty 4 commentator, beloved member of the scene. And he turned up at this UK event. What we always used to do, as I'm sure you know, at the UK events, is all the sort of semi-celebrities, you know, in the UK scene. We'd all get together, sit around in circles. That was like when we would catch up, you know, and we'd all drink a few beers. And D-Man turned up wearing this fucking League of Legends t-shirt, right? And this is like 2009, 2010, before it really sort of took off. And I was, and we were sat down, and I was like just laughing at him, going, "What the fuck is that on your chest, mate? League of Legends, Babby's first MOBA, you daft cunt. Why aren't you playing fucking Hon or something? That's never. Have you seen how shit it looks? Because obviously back in 2009, 2010, the game, people forget how bad it looked. It looked like absolute fucking ass." And he was going, "Nah, Riot's great. They're a real cool company. They're giving me like loads of support. You get t-shirts. We can do key giveaways. We get early access to the game. The developers are super friendly." Obviously, that was back when Riot was pretending to care about esports and not just their own evil machinations. And I said to him, I said, "I'll have a fucking bet with you, Lee. I'll have a bet with you, mate. That game is going nowhere. That is a waste of your time. Stay on Call of Duty." And him and Joe Miller were laughing at me, and they were right.
See, what you'd have said to him, if you'd have just phrased it as, "Listen, D-Man, I doubt you'll even be casting this game in 5 years."
I could have still won.
You could have got him back, yeah. Inadvertently, you could have got him. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but
you could have mentioned him now. Well, I was right later. You know, not about the game, but yeah, you are done.
I just got straight wrecked, basically. So that's one of my L's. But the Cillian one also definitely an L. Cillian was not the next big thing to break out of Denmark. In many ways, he was the worst thing to break out of Denmark. But he is now the replacement for Rubino on this heroic lineup. Now I'm happy Asilian gets another chance. He's a cool guy, good kid. But I feel like we're watching sort of heroic kind of.
A question I have about that is that, as far as I know, because if you remember, Asilian, as we talked about in the last episode, was in Imperial before, is, as far as I know, the last few years, Asilian, I think, has been playing as an in-game leader. And obviously in Heroic, I think they actually still had Freiburg doing that job. So that makes me wonder if that's one of the reasons they've done it, is that they want like a dedicated in-game leader and Freiburg doesn't want to do it anymore. Because I even said it at the time, I don't think it just suits his temperament as a person. It's not his role. It's not the way his mind works. It never really made sense for him to do that role. I think he just did it because he had to in some of these squads.
Yeah, and look, I'll let you in on a secret. Asilian don't want to be no fucking in-game leader neither, mate. Asilian did this. Like, he hit a point in his career where it was just like the only way to justify his inclusion on the roster was he had to adapt and learn becoming an in-game leader. Like, I guarantee he'll probably never say it publicly, but I will tell you, he absolutely does not want to be an in-game leader. He feels it detracts too much from his game, and he wants to be a player that does more on the server. But again, when you have bad performances or you're not being utilized correctly in your mind, we see it even at like the high-level star players. Sometimes they get it in their head, well, I'll be the in-game leader and then I'll look great. But of course, it's never that easy. It's not a solution. But I don't think that's the answer, and I don't think Asilian really wants to be an in-game leader at all either. So Heroic are kind of in that position now where it's like they're like a budget NIP in a lot of ways. They've got all these players that can do things if all their roles could be met. No real leadership on that team. Nobody you would call as a bona fide in-game leader on that team. Nobody you would call a bona fide tactician on that team. And I think Heroic have got all problems.
Wait, and remember there was that story where Modi's like the player coach. Remember that one where that was one story a few months back, which was just like fucking hell. And also, as we have referenced already, what even is the point of Heroic? I mean, as you speculated, it seems like they just try to get as many names as they can so they can flip the team.
Yeah, just ridiculous. Heroic. I don't know about that, but then again, I don't know what happens to Rubino now. Because, again, you've got to think about things in terms of, like, stock, right? A player at any given moment is you're either hot or you're fucking not. And I think Rubino, like, when he came onto this team, he had that great performance where he was a stand-in from Astralis, and everyone was like, yeah, get this kid. We all thought he was going to be on a better team. He goes to Heroic, barely plays, weird shit about the eye infection, which nobody knows if it's true or not, and now he's back in free agency. Like, I don't know if you get a chance to be on even a tier 1 team now at that point. I think that's a fucking shame.
Well, there was a rumor recently, which I haven't bothered looking at it, so I have no clue. But it was just a rumor that people were spreading that, like, perhaps in the future they're going to make like some Norwegian team with fucking Kroman and Jacob and fucking Rain and Rubino. Like try to make all the players put together. And then this is why it's a weird rumor, because the weird part of the rumor was like, but Jacob's not into it. Like, surely it should be fucking Rain, that isn't it? What are you talking about? So it sounded like a weird rumor, but then again, there is a part of me feels like they're actually not that far off being able to make a fucking all Norwegian team. It wouldn't be a joke at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So and again, there is that. I think DK put something up about that, didn't he?
Yeah, I think it was something along those lines. I didn't read the whole thing, so I'm not sure how in depth it was.
Yeah. So look, the other story, of course, is despite kind of what we speculated might be happening, is Olaf Meister has decided to come back in time for the E-League Premier. So Olaf Meister's return to FaZe. Now, I got to say, I don't know if I was getting a bit carried away because I think we disagree on this. I felt after Kroman's last performance in FaZe where, he seemed to be able to, making these great clutches, putting up good numbers. Didn't look out of place for my mind at all on that roster. In fact, people perhaps a little bit underperforming while Kroman was overperforming on that roster. I thought the best course of action for FaZe to get through these next run of tournaments was to basically sideline Olaf Meister, put him into free agency, sell him out of his contract or whatever, stick with Kroman, make him a full-time fifth, give the lad the confidence, the boost, and see what you can do. Because, they've won a tournament with him. It's not like it couldn't work. It's not like it was impossible. So, I don't know. I was a bit disappointed to see Kroman kind of put back to being on the bench. And Olof Meister just brought back for E-League. We've got no idea how good Olof Meister is going to be. We've got no idea how much time he's been able to dedicate to practice, staying in personal shape in terms of, deathmatch, aim, all of that stuff. And I don't know. I don't like it before a big tournament like E-League. I think this could be a mistake, in my opinion.
Like the sense I got from talking to FaZe players is like they're all like super high on Olof Meister as a player. Like they think he like helps the rest of them, does all the like key things that you need in a team, smart veteran and stuff. So to me, I feel like he's one of those players where like he's like a comfort player for the others. Like they feel like, okay, that job's taken care of if he's there, and then I can do my job. Whereas that's the problem with having stand-ins is you always feel like, great, we won the game, but like, how long is this guy even going to be here? Are we building anything? Are we just going off how well we play in this one game? So to me, I think part of it's that they think he plays a role that's underrated by the community. And then secondly, it's the idea that like, let's just get the real team back together and we can actually start progressing again. Whereas obviously the last few months, while fantastic in terms of results, have just been a holding pattern, Like they're not going to become the best team and beat Astralis every time. So I feel like for players like Nico, players like Guardian, obviously still at their peaks, absolutely top players, you don't want to just be spinning your fucking wheels. You want to actually feel like you had the real team and you have your shot to go head to head. Then if you lose, fair fucks.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I really don't know, like what's going to happen here. Like I think again, understand. I am beyond sympathetic to what's been going on, and that's why we've never talked about it openly on the show. I'm gonna respect Olof's privacy. If he ever wants to open up about it, that's entirely up to him. I think there's some things that should be a bit beyond discussions in the game, but we know that he's had a lot on his plate right now, and it would be understandable if he came back and was a shadow of the player we know he can be. Nobody would ever be harsh about his level of performance being poor, but you create this new level of pressure by coming back and like, I am ready now. And it's the second time he's done it. So what happens if he comes back and he underperforms? What happens if it comes back and FaZe bomb out and shit the bed? Where do you go from there? How do the teammates feel? I will say this about FaZe. I've been critical of FaZe as an org in the past for a variety of reasons, not least of all their association with certain websites and other bullshit. But in terms of how much they've supported Olof Meister and their players through this period, it's exemplary. You will not find a better example of an organization supporting a player through tough times and sort of juggling that with what the players want to do while simultaneously having to think about business. I think they've probably got it right, even though my inclination would have been I would have cut Olof by now if I had been in charge. But honestly, I think this is like just an insane amount of pressure going into E-League for everybody. And yeah, I don't know, man. I don't want this story to have a sad ending. I hope FaZe go out there and shit on everyone and Olof's back and he's playing like it's 2015 again. But I do not see that as an outcome at all.
Because FaZe has players like Guardians even said he's towards the end of his career now. This is time to win a major. Nico's in his absolute prime, so he can go pretty much anywhere he wants when people speak English. Someone like Rain, this is the best scenario he can be in. Obviously, there is the sense with that team that like the pressure is there from everyone that this is the team that's supposed to win. Like anytime they don't win a tournament, it's failure. Like they're not a team. It's not like when we were talking about the Mouse Sports team on the other episodes. Like, if you get a lot of top fours, you did your fucking job. That was probably pretty good actually. It's probably where slightly above the weight you should be punching at. So the thing about FaZe I see is either they're going to win a lot or they're going to blow the whole team up. Like I could see a world in which you maybe have two players coming in the next, well, maybe there'll have to be three for the major, but there might be some big changes in 3 or 4 months of this team. I can absolutely see that. Maybe even right after this next major, because obviously the timing's enough where Olof would have got a couple of tournaments under his belt, E-League Premier, DreamHack, then you go to the major. I feel like the major's where it has to all happen, because this is a team where when you pump that much money in and you've got players who have so many options and who don't want to just stick around being mediocre, you've got to win. It's one of the only teams in the world where I think it's 100% they have to win some of these tournaments.
Yeah, and this was something I was talking about with Davey the other day and Semphis as well. They're kind of the opinion that people have almost kind of been a bit too, crazy with FaZe, right? Like they were sort of saying, you see a lot of people talking about how, FaZe are having bad tournaments, but they're still making it to finals and semifinals. Yes. And traditionally, I kind of feel like with mouse sports, I think not everybody gets to be number one, and not every team has a path. Yeah, and not every team has a path to being number one. Sometimes you get to be number 3. That's the peak, and you should be more than fucking happy with that. That's the nature of sports. The reason I think I'm as critical of FaZe as I am, and I think a lot of people are, is that this team, when it was put together, was lights out the best roster in terms of star power and talent we'd ever seen assembled. And it's never delivered as much as it should have done. And it existed at a time when it was wide open, before the second coming of Astralis. The Brazilians were dropping off. There was a clear path where they could have dominated for 3 to 6 months and been a dynasty level of team, like a Fnatic or whatever, but that didn't happen, and I think it should have done. Honestly, that's why I'm critical of them. I don't know if you share that view.
Here's the thing: I always say this about this particular lineup of FaZe, which is, I always thought when I saw the lineup on paper, listen, obviously I'm going to watch. It's going to be fucking exciting, but that does look like a very weird lineup of players to make work. There's a reason why. Think back in history on all the great CSGO teams, all the teams that were number one, that won the majors and weren't like the fluke wins, they all have a balance within the team of roles and skill sets and how good a player is and whether he has a star mentality or whether he has a supportive mentality. They all had a good balance. And now some of them might have been slightly more skewed one way or the other. I think there was some teams in the past one where they maybe didn't have mad skills, but they had great teamwork. Some of them had a lot of skill and just enough teamwork, But no one's ever done it where you just load up all stars and just an in-game leader. So I always said this: if they could do it, fair enough. They've changed Counter-Strike. They've almost broken the mold of what you can do. And even then, it might have taken everything out of them. But it is undeniable when you look at the squad that they have, even now on paper, the reason why in your brain it'll never make sense unless they win the tournament is because we already know that they sort of showed it when they had the stand-in. If you take 2 of these players and put them on a team, that team should be going to finals, should be going to top 4s, should have a chance to win. So if you put 3 or 4 of them in one team, just because of the way you think about the game, your brain will always say, surely it would win. It's like when they made that Barcelona team with fucking Neymar, Suarez and Messi. Of course you should win every single tournament. Now, you don't necessarily, sure, but your brain just tells you each of these players could be the star striker of this team, could be an amazing guy to build a squad around. So it just shows how subtle team balance is, what roles people play, the things I was referencing with Orphan, the things people do that don't show up in the server because you don't know if he made this other player comfortable, that then he got 3 kills. And so the guy you're looking at didn't actually do anything to you. He was just sat in another part of the map, but something about the way he plays, the way he comms, makes the other guy play 2% better, and that ends up being the big difference maker. So I agree with them on one level. This is why actually I took so much flack at the end of last year when they were bombing all those finals. When they had 2, 3, 4 finals where if they'd have won them, it had already been over. It'd be their era. They'd have been the fucking dominant team. They'd have already won that fucking Grand Slam, by the way. They've already had enough chances.
Oh yeah, of course.
So when that was happening, right, people really thought that when I was bigging them up, I was saying that they were doing all that. It already is their era. They're already out of the best team. They're winning everything. Doesn't matter if they won this one. It's just a fluke. No. The point I was making is take aside the context of who they are and compare them to any team in history, and they look pretty fucking favourable. They'd be a top 10 team of all time. That's what think about it. They've got some titles. They've got tons of finals. They've got an ungodly amount of top 4s. Then you add in now where almost for a laugh, they took in 2 different stand-ins, neither of which were elite players, still got top 4s, still won fucking tournaments. In an objective sense, it's unreal what they've done. It's just that, yes, when you have players who are all going to go in the Hall of Fame, literally every player will probably be a Hall of Fame player, and you're all playing together, you kind of have to some degree, judge them to a higher standard because that's just the level of talent you had,
Yeah. So look, there's another team that got announced, and it's kind of a bit something I want to get your perspective on as well. We all remember Mixwell and Lowell, and again, for context, these are 2. Spain is historically a scene that has produced talent, but generally has lacked the infrastructure, lacked the sponsorships. They've always had big LAN events there. They've always been part of Counter-Strike history, and more on an individual, kind of player basis rather than any great teams. And Mixwell, when he sort of broke out and was scouted originally to be in that Optic lineup, and then everything else, and then he got that, ends up in G2, and Mixwell was a player a lot of people had a fondness for and still believe could be, hanging on a top tier team to this day. And Lowell, well, you remember when he was on Mouse Sports, he broke out. A lot of people thought they found another incredible talent, and for whatever reason wasn't able to kind of hang there and kind of petered out. His level of form, he exploded, and then it kind of, went down. Well, these two players now, sort of teamed up together, obviously both Spanish, and they've got this team called Movie Star Riders, which sounds like an adult film or, one of Big Herc's movies or something.
Just like the occupation of fucking Instagram models.
quite possible. So I thought it was interesting, but they put together this all Spanish lineup, and the players on it, obviously coming from that Spanish scene. They might not be, the sort of best known, but it's made up of the sort of some of the ex-Giants roster and whatnot. So they've kind of come together to make an all-Spanish lineup. So I just wanted your thought on this. Is this a team that, because they've got these experienced and talented players, that can somehow make it work? Could we see Movie Star Riders be one of those like kind of upset teams in Europe, or is this kind of like just a sort of sad retirement home? Because honestly, there's some parallels here with Ents, and Arlu saying, I want to be on a Finnish team. And our reaction to that was quite negative. And, you've seen how well they've done. So could Ents be or rather could Mixwell's team be the Ents of the Spanish scene?
Unfortunately, this is the downside, because remember, everything is always going to come. Everything that has an upside has some kind of a downside somewhere. Maybe not for the person who's gaining. Sometimes it's a knock-on effect elsewhere. The downside of this fabulous era we live in, where you have all these multinational teams and people are willing to take in people from other countries that isn't the traditional player, is you're going to get scenarios where when you're the one really good player from your country is well known, your country can't benefit from that. Everyone else is benefiting from it, but you're not there to bring up the next generation. You're not there to help someone else not have to be the star player of a team where if they're not really cut out to be, if they're going to be at a top level. So I definitely have admiration for Mixwell, that he's willing to do this, that he's willing to give it a go. Same as when Alu went after Nip and FaZe rather, and was willing to make Ents and was willing to give it a try, etc. Yeah. The only part that is my concern is, just like the player I mentioned before with Alu, is there's definitely a clock on this. Like, as much as Mixwell's like, it's always my dream to play in Spain, I get to stay home with my family. Problem with that is, mate, it wasn't your dream to never qualify for any lands, get shit on, not be in EPL, and play and lose in first place, last place at DreamHack Open Valencia. That isn't your dream. So what you'll find is, I'll say you've got 6 months. If you haven't accomplished things like qualifying for lands, like maybe even getting some upsets, you will eventually realise, to be fair, just being in an EU team means I can stay at home with my family. The Spanish thing, actually, you know what? There's a world in which if I can't make this team good, the best way I can represent Spanish CS is actually be in tournaments, be a good player, to represent them that way. So I feel like I don't know enough about these players to know if they're going to do anything. I don't go ahead and imagine not, just because obviously most teams don't. But obviously, Lowell's a half-decent player. Mixwell is a good player. I do think he gets a bit overrated for other factors around him as a player. He's got a very amenable guy. Doesn't seem to have anyone who has any bad words against him. Good all-round skill set. But I don't put it this way. I don't buy the idea that he's just going to hard carry this team and they're going to get all crazy upsets. It's going to be it's not a fucking Disney movie, put it that way. It's real life.
So we'll keep it Spanish and we'll go to DreamHack Valencia to sort of start closing out the show. I will be honest here. I didn't catch the group stage games. I only caught the playoffs. So I can't really talk about how that panned out. But we can certainly talk about how Virtus.pro didn't win a fucking game at a tier 3 tournament.
Yikes.
Yeah. That is probably the only time the use of the word is appropriate.
Every time you think, right, it's like Nip over the last few years. They've hit fucking rock bottom now. Have you tried losing 16-1 to a bunch of semi-unknown Danes? No, you're right. I haven't tried that. That's one on the bucket list. There we go.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, Al, to Fragster's credit, I think they're a fucking real good team. Definitely one to keep an eye on. The Refresh kid is fucking unreal. Like, another one that I think could be a top talent moving into 2019. Again, we talk a lot about, all these like FPL fucking pug stars and everything. Like Refresh is a little bit older than say like a Sergey or these 16-year-olds we got coming through. We were talking about last episode. He is 20 years old, but I think the kid is like ready now. Like he's carrying this Fragsters team, stands out all the time. Styled on Virtus Pro here, which sure it's not much. It's not even really a feather in your cap anymore at this stage. But this is a kid that can definitely go to a big team and do something with his career. So definitely one to watch.
Well, but the other one in that team's that Starvin guy. I think he is
Starvin
like the,
as well. Yeah,
the kid who's like, I mean, I saw him at one of the other DreamHacks. He looked all right.
Yeah, well, he is. Yeah, he's the youngest on the team. He is 16.
Just being able, people don't realize this, because most players, and especially if you're an NA fan, like a lot of people obviously watch content because it's in English, NA players are notorious for taking years to develop their LAN game. I've always made this point, in Europe, we don't do it that way. Like, if you're actually good, you just fucking turn up to LAN and start playing. So the fact that you can do anything on LAN when he's 16, I think that's legit. Like, I definitely, it's one of those ones where it's like the fucking end of the Phantom Menace, isn't it? Like, we will follow your career with great interest.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like there's a couple of players on that team that I think will go somewhere. And you're right, how many 16-year-olds actually start doing it at this kind of, borderline elite level? It doesn't happen very often. Generally, these players are either flashes in the pan, if it happens at all, or they turn out to be legitimate phenoms. But yeah, this performance from Virtus Pro here was absolutely embarrassing. Even as much respect as I want to give Fragsters, sure, these are best of ones, but come on, guys, like 16-1, like what the fuck is going on here? And then obviously, like they had the series against G2, no doubt in my mind that was only going to go one way. And again, they had one competitive map before absolutely capitulating. I just don't even know like where you go. Like as Virtus Pro, I think again it was DK put something out, and it was just like Virtus Pro are thinking about breaking this team apart and just picking up a new roster. If you give a fuck about your brand strength, yes, that's exactly what you have to do at this point. I mean, Pasha, great guy. Let him stream. Like he'll always make a living from CS. Neo, absolute legend. But I think at this point, these guys need to know where the fuck they are in their career, and it's the tail end. And you're just embarrassing yourself at this point, going out and representing a top level team. Bialy's back now, and he's like the standout player on Virtus Pro. That's where we're at. And now all of a sudden, where Bialy had that long period of not being able to play to his clear ability, now it's the fucking veterans that are looking absolute trash tier players. Like, enough's enough. Like, seriously, like, I can't think of a CS fan base that suffered like this. It must be infuriating. It must be infuriating.
Especially because, like, the suffering has been extended so unnecessarily because Virtus Pro hit that sweet spot where, like I've mentioned before, last year they got invited to every single tournament they attended pretty much. So as a result, they'd hit the point where just for, like, having so many fans, they essentially got to go to tournaments, bomb out of the tournaments, but you only saw them because they got all the fans, but the fans want to watch them to see them do well. So you're actually stuck in like the worst scenario if you're the fan, because you almost wish the team had died. So you're like, right, can I fucking move on with my life? Can I start supporting AGO or see if fucking King Win's ever going to, can I actually wait for the next generation as opposed to watch this team one piece one at a time die slowly in front of me?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely just obscene.
Plus, my heart can only take so many Pasha tweets.
Oh,
I can't. It's somehow, because when you look at him, he looks like such a hard man and he's so built. Somehow when he does sort of like an emotionally vulnerable tweet, it hits you even more like, oh. It's like if Andre the Giant was like, please. Well, he's dead now, but he's
dead now, of course.
If he was alive still, and he's like, don't feel so good. You're like, hey, all right, Andre.
I mean, it's not as if, as well, if you're a Polish fan, if you're a Polish Counter-Strike fan and you only support Virtus Pro because you've got that sense of national pride and they were the best Polish team. Virtus Pro haven't been the best Polish team for fucking a while now. Go pour your love onto AGO. They've got some players that are getting better. They're going out there. They're fucking trying. They're winning series. You got guys like fucking Snatchy, like absolutely, who just looks like Sam, but with red hair, like, which is a reason to support them. This is a good fucking team with like players that are improving. They're going to events. They're getting wins. Like if you want to wave the Polish flag at a CS event, go and wave it for AGO. Virtus Pro don't give a fuck anymore, man. It's like, seriously, this is the end, and it should be the end. It's just sad. It's just sad. We've said this before, but you're right. Every time I think they'll pull the plug now, they'll pull the plug now. They never do, and then they go to an event and it's not terrible, and and then they just go to the next event and it's fucking worse. It's worse than it ever was. It's like you hear about how people raise the bar. What is it when you lower the floor? Like, what the fuck is that? How do you do that? It's like it's unreal. That's what they're doing.
And remember, earlier this year when they cut Taz, they said that there would be further roster moves coming depending on the next couple of events. Now, I don't care what you think. Like, the odd result, like winning that fucking V4 Future Festival, like, that isn't enough. Come on.
No.
There's got to be more than that. Like, you got to actually show me something. So, like, I want to know from the org side what's going on now. Because that's the weirdest part about that news. Again, it's like Nip. When you see them for years not making the roster moves, everyone knows they should. You think, right, they're getting cynical. The org thinks, let's just squeeze the last drops of juice out of these big names. So then why all of a sudden out of nowhere be like, actually, now just cut them all? It's like, that doesn't make sense. Either be a sports team or be a fucking entertainment team. You can't just try and fail at both and then have nothing at the end. And imagine a world in which like they try to rebuild an entirely new squad. Who the fuck's it going to be?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think as well, I know Virtus.pro is synonymous with like Polish Counter-Strike and everything else. If that is a big, like, obviously I don't know the metrics for what success is. I don't know where their money's coming from. I don't know how important the Polish demographic is to their business model, right? Like, I don't have any insight into that. But if it's super important, you just go and you just sign the AGO kids. End of discussion. Problem solved. If that's where the money comes from. But if it isn't, and we know you're owned by ES Force and you got fucking crazy amounts of money, just go pick up an actual team. Just go at this point. Stop trying to slot fucking tier 2 Polish players in with pros that are actually now. If they were coming up now, nobody would have them on a roster like the way they're playing. 3 for 17 Neo. Like, just stop. Like, go get a real fucking side. There's plenty out there who would kill for an ES Force fucking sponsorship compared to the shit they've got, and you would get way more mileage and better finishes. But yeah, this just DreamHack Valencia is just like, fuck me, dude. Like, I don't know. Virtus.pro fans, like, just vote with your fucking feet. Burn the shirts. Go get another one. Nobody would blame you at this point. There's loyalty and then there's stupidity. One of the standout performers here. We talked a little bit about G2 underperforming in the last one, so I won't retread that ground. But I got to say, Luminosity from nowhere, made it all the way to the fucking finals. Not a team that I gave much credence, but of course they've got the Steel, they got the Henny, they got the Lucas now. This is like, I thought it would.
And they even turned up to a DreamHack Open final.
Yeah, I know.
Everything's possible now, Rich.
No, but like legit, because this was kind of thrown together, like, so soon before the tournament, I thought this was just going to be another let's go fucking bomb out in groups, work on our tan and say fuck it, we'll be good for the next one. And I expected that, and I think a lot of people expected that, and I guess in this context you'd almost fucking forgive it. But they actually turned up. They actually showed, if that old Immortals team could have stayed together instead of all this dumb fucking bullshit that plagued it, where the fuck would they be in the current top 10 now? Because you got 3 of the guys from that Immortals team, and Yell, who is actually a decent player, and Nekiz, who's obviously a decent player too. Certainly not as good as the players they had on that old Immortals lineup, but very good within the context of what you can go out and get in Brazil right now. And they made it all the way to the final of this level of tournament, pretty much without any practice, without any setup, without any preparation. It's criminal, man. That Immortals team could have been fuck knows where, like top 5. It's unbelievable. So I'm guessing you caught some of the Luminosity games. I mean, I guess good.
I saw them beating G2 for a start off, so
yeah.
Got to give them credit. They're obviously a quality side. I think they're going places. If you can beat world class in-game leading and star players like that, obviously you've got some gas in the tank. No, but the thing I like about this squad is, like, the one thing I have to say, it's a reasonable assumption, is if Henny and Lucas are going to play together forever, and they're, for whatever reasons, obviously they're identical twins, so they're literally that cliche of where we literally do everything together.
Yeah.
you have to assume it must help put a basis of team play within the core when the guy that you're playing with is literally you, but just with slightly different life experiences from a meter over. It's pretty sick, actually. I should probably use that somewhere. Not bad.
Well, timestamp it so you can.
Yeah. So delete that and then let me put that in my own video. And then obviously, Steele is a pretty solid player. I mean, when he actually was having those bad results in the Liquid, that was good. That's why it made sense to me when they said he, there was some problems going on with his family and stuff. Because I've always thought he was a solid enough player ever since he was in Immortals. So yeah, the backbone here is not a half bad team. And if anything, as I mentioned before, it really fucking shows up the NTC team that this team's half decent, and their team, which on paper should be way better, is nothing. Is absolutely nothing on LAN. So yeah, this is a team where, who knows, maybe this is the team Fops is going to go to, and then you've got some star power to go along with them. I have to say, the games I watched, a lot of these players that we're talking about that we know, the known quantities, they're the same players. Like Henny still does the exact same shit where he misses the 2 easy AWP shots and then hits the fucking 360 spinning, mouse comes off the table, a fucking flash of light goes inside the mouse and makes them no scope again. He does that shit still. So it's still entertaining to watch, but still an unreliable player. So I'd certainly like having another team that might do something at this level at least. Maybe they can go to the DreamHacks of the world. They can try and qualify online for the last spot at a real tournament. The ones I'm more interested, though, as you referenced, is the newer players, the ones I don't know, the ones that were in the last Luminosity squad, because I do want to see, is one of these players going to become good? Because between them and that Team 1 team, which, if you remember, did the WSG result, these, apparently, that's one of the problems that the Immortals team had, is that these players just can't be bought. They're just not, for the value of the fact they have no name value and they have yet to do anything meaningful in their careers, they cost too much money. Now, the upside of that is it means some of them might actually be a fucking legit diamond that you just haven't had a chance to see, because in the old world, they'd have already been on Immortals, they've already been on SK. We just don't know yet because they can't be brought through the scene due to the fucked up economic situation, which you've noticed is affecting people at every level of the game at the moment.
Well, I used to catch the old Luminosity a lot, before they made these changes. I used to watch a lot of late night NA, just with a fucking laptop on or whatever. And, I'll be honest. For me, the disappointment that came out of this was Yell. I felt like online, he's had some unreal performances. And I know they're trying to repurpose him in this team right now. But, Nekiz surprised me as being the guy that stood out at this tournament and had some great performances, dropping 20s against G2. Wouldn't have expected that. And the thing you got to think about here is, Nekiz is 22, Yell's 26. Yell might be the guy who gets it done online, but he's come to LAN here and it didn't work. He didn't look to sort of belong in this lineup. And even though he's statistically stronger than Nekiz traditionally, if you go and look on the HLTV ratings and everything, I think you probably stick with a 22-year-old. So I think what we'll see here is Yell will probably be the guy that sort of makes way. And if you think about the Brazilian players you can go out there and get right now, like you say, you got Phelps, probably is going to be available very soon. Bolt's obviously available now. Maybe there's a chance where Immortals could come back together. The Immortals lineup that caused all the drama. Maybe the redemption storyline is those 5 players come back together again, playing for Luminosity, the original breakout Brazilian, brand. And you realize, shit, man, we completely fucked that up. We should never have done it. Let's change. Let's be real now. The way Steele wants to do things, the way Bolts wants to do things. Maybe Henny and Lucas can say that's the way we're going to do things. Fuck all that Villa Mix bullshit, all that party boy bullshit, and let's get it done. And like I say, there's a world where that happens. I mean, it's a very believable possibility right now. I'd love to fucking see that. I think if they go out and do that and put that 5 together, I mean, it sucks for Nekiz, who's playing well. Yell had an opportunity here. Fuck it, you make your breaks. But if that actually happens, who knows, man? I think Luminosity don't just get it done at fucking DreamHack Valencias. I think they can go and get it done internationally again, because that's what should have happened the first time around. All right.
Does the NTC team, by the way, actually, if they haven't joined SK yet, does the actual org of NTC have money?
Look, I've heard all sorts of fucking rumors, mate. I mean, listen, the NTC, as far as I'm concerned, it's not even an org; it's a name. Yes. People have said in the scene that SK Gaming have been paying these guys, but they couldn't ever make it public because of the whole conflict of interest situation with the other Brazilian team. No, I haven't seen the fucking paper trail for that, so I can't verify if it's true or not. But if you ask anybody who's even on the periphery, they'll tell you, yeah, SK Gaming have been paying them their salary. You remember, of course, they had that picture where they were in Cologne, right? Not during ESL 1 Cologne, but just hanging out and saying they were having a boot camp. Well, that's where SK Gaming are based. So there's definitely pieces out there that suggest SK Gaming have actually been paying this team, getting no brand recognition. Mind you, as it would fucking happen, they've done them a massive favor in that regard, because how much more can the SK Gaming brand get dragged through the fucking mud, you know?
Still is impressive, though, to be paying 2 teams' salary and not a single player's wearing your jersey at any events.
I know.
How'd you manage that?
Yeah, Alex Muller, the mastermind, he's done it again. I mean, the whole thing's fucking stupid from start to finish. So, yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know. I think basically, if I was SK Gaming, you just take a fucking hard Brexit on this. You just fucking bail and you just let them go. Like, you never, with the players you've got left in NTC, you can't build nothing. Henny and Lucas are out. They should have been in MIBR, honestly, instead of Stewie and Tarek. That's the team we probably all get behind. Lucas is an unreal unsung hero. Tackle levels, of support play with what you get from him in terms of doing the donkey work. He probably could be a player that would have, reinvigorated Cold Zero or whatever. But for whatever reason, the politics, and I understand the reputation precedes them, it didn't work out. All right, fine. But what you got to realize at this point is there are some players who are criminally good that are about to enter into the free agency, and Luminosity have got to go out there and get them. I know you must have been hoarding the money you got from the fucking buyout back when they went to SK originally. Go spend some of that money. Let's get fucking Bolts back on this team. Let's get KNG back on this team, and let's have the story we should have had the first time around with Immortals. Right, let's wrap up the show by talking about North. They won DreamHack Valencia. The boys are back in town. They're yeah. They're it's an interesting one. I mean, for me, I still can't get excited by this North lineup, even when they win tournaments like this. I just think there was a period of time post Dignitas where we thought this team was going to be great, and then you did the swap. And then you get the likes of Valde on the team, and we're excited again. I don't know. I don't think winning DreamHack Valencia when you're a team like North really means shit. The amount of times they've gone to a tournament, by the way, of this caliber and finished fucking dead last or something, also kind of just tempers this as not being anything to get excited about. But what do I know? I think I might actually be slightly biased against North in my mind. So, Duncan, you've never been biased against any team. So...
the big problem with this win here is this is almost like a perfect media exercise in how to make people hate your team even more. Because you go to this LAN, which, it's not super duper teams. It's like a couple that are all right. You win the LAN, so your fans want to believe, finally, we're on the up. But what's that? You removed the player that Thorin was telling you for months was one of the problems. Mertz never really was able to cut it on the top tier as an AWPer. You've put Mixwell in there. He's actually had a pretty decent tournament. Sure.
I thought Mertz got fucked. I thought Mertz got fucked on this, honestly. So again, this is another one of those areas where we disagree. I do not think cutting Mertz was the viable way to go. I thought Mertz statistically did well, and I thought he was a talent that needed to be nurtured, not fucking thrown to the wolves at the first time he had a bad tournament. I thought Mertz was actually a good find and would have gone places. Now he's in that fucking nightmare situation to be as an up-and-coming player. You get your breakout chance, you don't do anything wrong, and you get fucking ditched by the players who were telling everyone you were the guy to step up. I know. I thought the Mertz situation, it just looked really weird. It was, for me, I'll wager you, it was another one of those stupid fucking Danish arguments and nothing to do with anything he did on the server. That's my opinion.
So here's the thing. The biggest flaw that North had whenever I watched them for the last 3 months is all on the CT side. The T side was fine. And on the CT side, by the last 3 or 4 lands they went to, all they do all the time is just stack sites with no info gained yet. And what that tells me, if you're in a team that has a real in-game leader and a real coach, people who have tenure in this scene, is you are fucking out of options and you cannot play standard and win the game. You're not doing that because you think it's the best way to play the game. You're doing that to try and cover some people's arses. So whoever it is, in this particular sense, Mertz is a primary AWPer. You're giving him that expensive gun all the time. So for me, if you've got a primary AWPer, CT side's where an AWPer makes his fucking name. He has his spot. People can't come there. When he then becomes successful, now you cheat over to the other side because you've got the advantage. To me, the fact that they were doing these weird gamble stacks tells me that on some level, even they didn't buy it. They didn't think the lineup was correct. And if you look at the players there, I mean, who else can you remove at this point in time? Azy is clearly untouchable for whatever reasons. And actually, to be fair, has been doing his job.
I was going to say, he's playing well again. Yeah.
He's been doing good. Obviously, Kirby's just been signed. He hasn't even been in the team very long. I think he's actually been playing shit. Of everyone, I think he's been the most underwhelming relative to who he was before. Even in this win, I didn't think he was that good. Valde, generally, he's played out of his skin. I think he's been very, very good.
Valde's fucking sick. He's ridiculous.
Short of having loads of money for buyouts and having players available, I don't really see where you go. So they haven't got a lot of options. They tried to do some. They might even have to just bring Mertz back now. Maybe this is what they do. But yeah, I kind of feel like the problem with the North team is they're one of the most obvious examples for me of a team that's just got a ceiling that they have hit a while ago and they're never going to go past. They can still get the odd upset. They can still take a team to 3 maps. They can still look half decent on some maps. But there's clearly there's nothing about them that is special. There's no map that they're close to the best on. In fact, actually, I think this for me is the ultimate example of the team where if people interpreted it the way I do, this is the team where MSL's earning his rep back that he's a good in-game leader, because I think his team's a fucking mess and he's actually getting some half-decent results sometimes out of them. I think this lineup's going nowhere. It's got no potential. And so, unfortunately, because the North team he had with the really good players didn't do much, people have they're on the train that he's just a shit in-game leader now. So I think he's done a decent enough job. I just think that this lineup's a waste of time.
All right. Well, there you have it. And again, not really any strong thoughts about me for all the reasons. From me, for all the reasons I said, I kind of think this is a lineup that's ran its course, and all the tweaking is never going to work because you've got an idiosyncratic in-game leader with a bunch of idiosyncratic players whose flaws and foibles are all pretty much plain to see. So.
To me, what you need to happen if you're North, because obviously Astralis is off the table. Forget about that. You're not getting any of their players.
No,
you need the Optic team, who also in their own context is somewhat underwhelming. You need that team to peter out, and then the two of you get together, just make a good 5-man lineup. Maybe it is the return of Config. Maybe he has been humbled. Maybe Cajun comes back and you don't make him be an AWPer. There's many different ways you could go, and most of the answers seem to be in the Optic team. And the Optic team, when you look at them, they're not a very good team themselves. So I feel like some combo of the two is what's going to put Denmark back on the map as a second best team.
Yeah, and there was a great game actually in the EU minor between Optic and Ents. It was really good actually. So if people haven't seen that, go check out the VOD. Right, we got one of our $100 patron questions this episode, so we'll ask that. It's from Chris N. Wynn. Thank you very much. Been supporting the show since day one it came back. He says, while it is mostly out of control of the event organizers, if unpopular maps like Nuke and Cobble were replaced with older era competitive maps, such as, for example, Mill or an iteration thereof, would the games played be more competitive and or better to watch and do commentary for? So, I mean, I'll start with, I'll pick up with some thoughts on that. I think Valve, the way they balance maps, it's not in the way that a lot of people might intuitively think about things. So they typically, for example, when everyone was complaining about Inferno, they didn't look to balance the map itself initially. If you remember, they made alterations to smokes and stuff like this. They're always looking at kind of things above it without having to change the maps. And then when they do the reworks of the maps, they factor in things like the economy. I think Inferno is very much a balanced map right now. If anything, I've always said, even though I hear a lot of commentators say to the contrary, you'll hear a lot of commentators go, oh, it's a CT-sided map. I don't think that's true. I think with the way the economy is, if the T's pick up the first round and get their economy rolling, it'll typically be a 9-6 half to the T's. I'd love to see the numbers on that, but that's my instinct about it. But I think it's a very balanced map overall, obviously. The bottom line is, I think maps like Nuke and Cobble have just never worked. They tried to make them too big, too grand, a little bit too clever, not have what you would consider a traditional Counter-Strike choke point. And they don't even really resemble a lot of like what they were in the past, which was they were designed to be CT-sided. They were designed that way. You had to be a very good T side to pick up the rounds, and anybody that did that was breaking the meta, breaking the mold. And now Valve sort of has a different idea on how to balance maps, and as a result, I think you get very unentertaining maps that either tend to lend themselves to blowouts or overtimes, and no one's having a good time. And I've never liked this new version of Cobble. They made it better and better, but it's not a map I like. I've never liked this new version of Nuke either. We've said that many times on the show. And there are maps out there that if Valve could get behind and go out to the map makers, how long's Tuscan been fucking dangled? Let's get that back, for fuck's sake. That map was great. I used to love watching that back in the day. There are maps out there that certainly could be brought back into the competitive map pool. Fuck it. At this stage, I'd even try something new, like Canals, over watching Nuke slowly die and get picked apart. No one's enjoying it. The pros don't want to play it. I don't want to watch it. I think one of the issues we have with Counter-Strike is the community at large rejects change. And as a result, we don't make wholesale changes. We don't make the cuts to the bone when we should be doing it. And we should have brought in newer maps, fresher maps, try some wacky shit out, instead of trying to repurpose old maps that were never fondly thought of anyway. I mean, that's the spoiler. Nobody ever said, I love Cobble. No one ever said that, like, from going back to 1.6. I'd rather we just had something completely new, and if it didn't work, fuck it, we'll try something else. But that never happened. I always thought, when you had the operations and we were playing all those new maps, I thought those maps would, maybe leapfrog into the competitive pool, make it a bit more interesting like that. So yeah, for me, I think Nuke and Cobblestone have been failures. I think I like the repurposing of Inferno to the credit, but yeah, at this point, I would take out Nuke and Cobble and put almost anything in. Oh, yeah, and Dust 2. I'll say the rework of Dust 2 has been sick, but Dust 2 was one of the best maps in any game ever made. So, it was always going to be good, even with a few tweaks.
I don't really care about, like, old maps, because I think there's political reasons as to why they haven't come back. Remember, the guy who makes Tuscan is a guy who, as far as I know, it's his map. So
yeah, exactly.
Valve isn't in a position where they just go, it's ours now. So as far as I know, there's some sort of bullshit behind that. Well, that's the thing that does annoy me. I made a tweet about this, I think maybe like end of last year or something, where what I did was I looked up, and over the last few years, Valve's like amount of money made from CS has been like 220 million, 250 million. And I looked, right, and I thought, right, CS has been like that sort of level for like 2 or 3 years. Then let's say the other ones were like half as much or a tenth as much. And I calculated, I said, Valve's actually made something like the better part of $1 billion from a game that, remember, the old way you made games was you make a game, you sell it, it sells for 6 months, you move on to your next game. Like, the model is such an amount relative to how much Valve put in day one to make the game, to how much they've made. It's like a license to print money. So if you can make the better part of $1 billion, and yet after all that, you still don't have like a team of people who are proven top map makers, whose whole life is like, listen, I just want to make great maps that people can play on, some casual, some competitive. Like, let's start figuring out the science behind the art of how you make a map and what works for competitive player, what doesn't. Like, maybe we're even breaking it down and we're learning how to do this part of a site, then we connect that to another part that works, whatever it would be, because you have to feel like this is the element that will kill CS one day, is that CS, as much as for someone like me, I love the fact it's the same because I just like watching the teams. It's the teams are the variable I care about. It's not the maps. But for the average fan, people get bored of things that are the same. They don't want to see this. Same as they complain when the same teams play, they will complain about the same maps being played. So the one thing I've always thought, that as cynical as it is, that's intelligent about League of Legends, is that they do purposely alter the meta so that old champions come back in and new OP champions eventually go out, and you have a turnover so that the game isn't the same all the time and it's tweaked. Well, in CS, why don't we have new maps coming in? Why don't we have people that, worst case scenario, at least we know, right, they're working on 2 or 3. We'll see what comes of that. You sit back and there's nothing going on. I did an interview with that FM Porn guy where I basically asked him 50 different ways. How does one get a map in? What goes on with the selection? How does a map get selected for competitive play? How do you actually monitor? And he basically could not answer any of these questions because he made it quite clear that you're literally not allowed to. Valve does not allow people who put the maps in to speak publicly about this, what criteria decides them, how it gets done. Like, the whole method has to be, for some reason, veiled and hidden away. So that's not a great sign right there, because I feel as though, while I don't have to know everything, there should at least be a sense if people are coming up for how you get into map making, how you get a map in the game. And at the moment, it feels very scattershot. And sadly, I end up going down the other side of the equation where I feel like to Valve, they're like, it's like what idiot fans always say on Reddit, like, well, why would they change anything? They're making loads of money. Now, to me, that's a fucking loser's mentality. I don't care if you're making $1 billion in that scenario, because you know what? My mentality would be, I'm going to make $3 billion because my game's going to last 15 years and I'm going to have mine be the biggest esport. So I guess I just have a different philosophy than some shithead who has $10 and goes, $1 billion. Like, you know, like that sort of person isn't have the right mindset. So yeah, I'd prefer that. Whether or not the maps are old ones, new ones, let's get a process in place that develops maps. Let's get a team of people, and that's actually, eventually, you're going to get some good maps come out of that. They might not all be good, but there's got to at least be a couple are going to end up hitting and sticking with how people play them.
And just a couple of points to that, and then we'll wrap up the show, right? So first of all, you definitely know that, Valve don't necessarily seem interested in that, because obviously we all know Sal, right? Volcano. Well, he worked with FMPone on Cash, designed like a new version of Nuke. There was another map called Crown, I think they made. And this is a guy who's like, basically, when he transitioned from being a pro, he wanted to get into map design and game design. And I'm pretty sure he had like talks with Valve and gave his opinions. And if I remember rightly, he was one of the players who was there when CSGO was launched, and that they had that big meeting in Seattle and they consulted with the pros. Well, he works at Riot now. You know, he's gone to Riot Games to work on their FPS. And I guarantee he's going to bring something to that fucking table. Whether they ever make a second game or not, who knows? But this is a guy who is Counter-Strike to the bone, has great ideas, about map balance, map design, map philosophy, and yeah, he's been allowed to go to a rival developer pretty much without any competition whatsoever. I think that's a real shame. And then the other point I want to make is, here's another reason why I think we struggle to try and get new maps through and into the pool. Well, pros, man, fucking pros. They do complain like way too fucking much. It's like, guys, I know like you're all fucking geniuses and you take the game to levels that's never been done before. And the idea that you have to hold 8 competitive maps and have a playbook for all of them in your mind is clearly too much for $25,000 a month. I mean, it's a travesty, isn't it, that you have to do that? But like, what better way to separate the greats from the goods than, right, here's 2 new maps ahead of time, not like they have done traditionally where it's like 3 weeks before a major, learn this. I'm talking about months before a major. You all know it's coming. It's out there. You can play it in the open beta or whatever, and this is going to be the 2 new maps that go in. Learn it. Then we'll see. And like you say, it will shake shit up, man. Like some teams that it never broke through on the other maps. Maybe they click on this map and then it's their pocket pick. And then it makes bans and picks and bans a bit more significant than what happened with Nuke, where it was like all players had a gentleman's agreement. We just won't pick it yet because it's shit. Maybe it'll cycle out, So I think the pros are their own worst enemy in that sense, because they have to be resistant to change, because change works against their interests. They always come out and say this new map sucks. It blows. Stick to the ones we know and already have playbooks for. So any final points or go to titles?
Yeah, I think generally, just to echo what you said there, like, not only has Valve shown no signs they're going to do this, if anything, the signs have been they're not interested. Like, they seem to think everything's cool. And funnily enough, I think they would even take this as us complaining. So sadly, it doesn't matter how many times us in our... You have to remember, right? Think about this, guys. Even the esports side of CSGO is still a niche of CSGO. Well, everyone who follows the esports side doesn't post on Reddit. And everyone who posts on Reddit doesn't see your thread. And so you're getting a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. So 100 of us just discussing this over and over and over again. Listen, sometimes it can be fun to discuss, sure. But beyond just spitballing. We can't actually enact any change, I'm afraid. I mean, like that's not the world we live in. I can't call up the fucking Valve dev and get an answer and really convince. Like, they don't, on that level, they don't really give a fuck. At best, they humor us.
Obviously, a great show. We did 2 this week, so we catch up. We know we've been dangling. Our schedule's looking a lot better. It's going to be easier for us to get back to normal. You know, Tuesdays, 2:30 PST. So there you have it. So obviously, a big shout out to all the people that make the podcast possible. Our patrons, which include our $100 patrons, Botvik, Chris Enwin, who asked that question there, Detlef Insomniac, TTM XMP, Hyolu, Ruxun, and Jerky's Minion. And of course, our $50 patrons, the Archangel Varao, Sodswar, Daniel Plamanov Yordanov, Pete Bidstrup, TC Owens, Vexy, Nostradamus, Marcus Kyunpa, Madsen, Oleg Ginter Zillan, Colin Penny, Mama Jamma Hennessy, Benakagi Assassin, and William Sutton. Shout out to you all. Shout out to all the people who chip in just $1 as well. And of course, that is the show. So we'll be back hopefully on Tuesday if there's anything happening. If it's a slow news week, who knows? But until then, take care of yourselves.